All right, we are live. And before we really get into the meat of things, just a really brief announcement for everybody. We have California State Championship, UAL, coming up this month. Everybody be there. That's going to be January 25th and 26th at the Los Angeles Convention Center for the Fit Expo. Really great event, very prestigious tournament. Hope to see you all there. I will be there. Another brief announcement. With our guest is throwing a tournament patty pull. A lot of us in California have done that one. We love the grinder events. That's going to be March 16th at noon. And yeah, let's get right into it. I'd like to introduce our special guest that we have today. A lot of you know him. His name is Dave DePew. Dave is a master personal trainer, has been for 3 decades, has also been a master licensed sports nutritionist for 2 decades. He's an accomplished strength athlete, strict curl world champion, arm wrestling promoter, and gym owner, among other things. Dave is just definitely a renaissance man. Welcome, Dave. Good to see you here.
Thank you very much, Kane. I appreciate it. I know it's going to be a fun time.
So one thing that we've known each other for about 5 years, I'd say, Dave, but I've been getting to know you a lot more lately. And this is just from my perspective, but a lot of people like you're kind of superhuman to a lot of people in the strength sports, really big in our community. But to me, your superpower isn't how much weight you can lift. Your superpower is you're a very, very smart man. And I really, really have grown to appreciate your perception of the world around you, the community around you, and how you serve that. Just wanted to say that, and I really, really appreciate that about you.
Well, thank you very much. Are you trying to get me to cry on your show? What's going
Yeah, man. It's just
on?
it really is a cool attribute that you have. And just to give everyone a little bit of context, so yeah, we were supposed to have our sound check on Tuesday. We did a little private Zoom to sound check and stuff. That was supposed to be a couple of minutes. We talked for what, an hour and a half, 2 hours?
Yeah. Yeah, it was wild. It was wild. We got away from us.
Yeah,
Hey, I
yeah.
can talk, man. We're going to find out. I don't shut up.
Ah. Okay, well let me pull up the chat here. Okay. Say hi. We've got the Drew in the chat. What's up? Thanks for coming to hang out. So Dave, one of the big things I know we wanted to talk about is everything going on in arm wrestling in 2025. And from the bit that we talked about, you have a lot of interesting ideas. And I want to preface that a little bit. You just threw an off the cuff tournament in San Diego called the Showdown, right?
Correct.
Yeah, that I had to be there the minute I heard that you were throwing a free tournament because I definitely want to advocate for that. I love seeing that. But one of the things that impressed me the most about the tournament was you had a pretty good turnout. I think based on, reputation and everything. But my gosh, you went through all of the classes in 2 hours. We went through what was it? All of the right hand in 1 hour, all of the left hand down to the finals in 1 hour. It was unreal. You got this thing
Yeah.
down on lock now.
Yeah, we definitely we definitely run things pretty quick, pretty smoothly, and that was on one table. These weren't big classes by any means. However, that is roughly about the time frame that we normally will do things. Like we will get through a whole class, and when I say class would be not per weight class in an hour. Obviously, it's the open or pro class, like all the way from the lightest to the heaviest. We'll get through that whole thing in under an hour, and that's pretty typical for us. So it just depends, obviously, like how many we're doing. As we're moving forward, we want to add more. We want to be able to have some novice classes. There won't be as many weight classes for those, but these will be our brand new, never having pulled before arm wrestlers. And we want them to have a really great experience. We want it to be, safe for them, but we also want to be able to get through that pretty quickly and get these people, on and enjoying the rest of the tournament with their family. Nobody likes 9 and 12-hour tournaments, so we don't really want to drag on for the sake of filling space and dragging on. And we certainly want it to be fast and efficient so that, people aren't just hanging about. People get hungry and they get afraid to go too far because their name might get called. And, especially if they're entered in multiple divisions, multiple classes, that's a big concern.
Yeah. And one other thing I noticed was you had your results up on Aries like really quick. I think I didn't even check till the next day, I think. But yeah, like Corey had all that in there. Are you working off the Aries system when you're running brackets?
Yes, we work off the Aries system. In my opinion, it's the absolute best way to go if you're looking to be an arm wrestling promoter. I mean, there's definitely, you don't have to buy software to do that. There's paper things that you can do to get started. There's all this stuff, but honestly, just call up Corey Miller. I mean, it has saved me so much frustration. It makes things go really quick. There's a little bit of a learning curve, but Corey is super supportive and helping you go through it and getting it up quick. Like you said, I mean, that's Corey, man. He puts the pressure on you. Hey, you finished your tournament? Send me those results. And he's so quick about getting those up there because he, like so many amazing promoters out there, he is equally as passionate about the sport, equally as passionate about growing the sport. And it's very evident in the hard work that he puts into, to the software. We didn't do much in the way of running competitions last year, and that largely is due to the competitions for the most part had been coming back, that weren't there. And so rather than draw and pull people away from some of those competitions and have our numbers be low too, we just simply made sure that, we could support those as best we could. Now we want to get back into the mix of things and run more competitions with a focus on new arm wrestlers, right? And that's something we talked about on Tuesday.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's where it's at. They're the ones sharing things. They're the ones that have the bug and really wanting to spread and grow the sport. Yeah, that's amazing. And one thing about Corey Miller, I've really gotten to know him more this last couple years or so as well. And yeah, you couldn't be more correct about him. He really does love this sport. Just that last North versus South too, when a lot of us community were helping out Josh to really pull together something fun. We were trying to figure out for that 145 class and establishing it when we had like 40 something super matches. What format would we choose to add a 145 class in there? And so we're racking our brains like round robin. Holy moly, that's a lot of pulling, a lot of matches, a lot of time. What would happen if we did triple elimination, this or that? I call up Corey just off the cuff, and he makes time for me immediately. And I'm like, look, here's the situation. We have X amount of super matches. We need a solidifying but expedited path to establish a 145 class. What's going to be the best format to do it? Efficiency, solidification, all that. He came back. He must have spent 2 hours of his time running math and stuff like that to tell me what the potential would be for the least amount of matches, most amount of matches per every type of format that we could have run. And I was just blown away by that, and he asked for nothing in return as well. So Corey's
Corey's a great guy and an amazing arm wrestler too. If you
sure is.
I don't know if you've ever had an opportunity to see him arm wrestle. He's called the Flash for a reason. I mean, he's super explosive. I mean, I've seen him get into grinders, and I mean, he's just overall very strong arm wrestler, dominant in the 165s, dominant in the 185 weight classes for so many years. And in contention, throughout, at least as long as I've known him as an arm wrestler.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. He's very impressive athlete. We have Paul Stevens in the chat saying hello. What's up, Paul? We've also got Todd Colazzo's in the house saying hello, and he says Elijah says hello as well. Good to have you both here. We've got Neil's index finger hanging out in the house. Good to see you here. It's the first time to see you. Dave, you've got a few tournaments that you are looking to do this year. Can you talk a little bit
Correct.
about that?
So for sure, we want to do our paid tournaments. These are our standard tournaments that we do, branded, specifically branded as annual tournaments. Although sometimes they don't run annually, but we try to put those on regularly so that people can come to count on those tournaments. One is our Patty Pool. We've been doing this tournament pretty regularly. I think we may have done that one last year. Yes, I believe we did that one last year, but we didn't really do any of the other tournaments that we normally do. But Patty Pool was one of them. King of Cali is our newest branded tournament. It is the passion of Kyle DePew to create that tournament. And you could have him on and talk about why he wanted to do that tournament and what it means to him. And I know a big part of that was to get the Derek Smith and Tom, get those guys. Tom is such an amazing arm wrestler, and I think the match between Derek and Tom was talked about for some time, and yet it wasn't happening. And the King of Cali sort of baited Tom out, to come out and do that competition. At least, I mean, that's kind of the story that I heard, and it worked out for Derek, and I think it worked out a lot for Tom too, because Tom got hungry again for arm wrestling, and he's in it, So very, very excited to have that tournament in our branded tournaments. Another one is the newest of the tournaments is the Kraken. So that one's themed after mythological, the Kraken, both in Norse mythology as well as Greek and Roman mythology. And then the Pole Hook Press, which we started that tournament, was branded as sort of a Night of Champions sort of themed tournament, and that started right around my 40th birthday. It coincided with that was 10 years ago we started that one. And then what I'm doing now with the free tournaments are the showdowns, and we're starting with the San Diego showdowns, and this is something that we'll, for the most part, do in San Diego. Obviously, if it's a San Diego showdown, and whether it's going to be here at Grinder Gym or if we look for other venues to do that, which is a strong possibility, because we do want to use that tournament to draw people in and grow the sport. And my focus primarily is to grow the sport here in San Diego, not to constantly rely on drawing arm wrestlers from other areas, although we do welcome them and love them and want them to come and pull here. It's more that we want to grow this community. I feel drawn to get anywhere from 200 to 300 arm wrestlers competing regularly in the San Diego area, and that's what I'm mapping out and trying to build and grow. And as it stands right now, I've got a lot of team captains who would love to see that happen. And logistically, we don't have a solid plan on how we would handle that level of interest, but we'll get there. That's a tomorrow problem, and hopefully that is a problem that we have to work through. So.
Well, that's what it starts with, and I think that's a big problem in our sport for growth is the idea as we're getting more facilitation, more promoters and everything like that. There's this kind of concept that they're competing with each other, or that they can't be too close together, or this and that. And I get that being the climate and how much where the sport is at right now. But the mindset should be where yours is at in terms of why don't we have a huge enough successful following just in San Diego alone? And there could literally
Yeah,
be another tournament happening that same day in LA or NorCal or something, pulling the same numbers. And so with that mindset, you kind of look at things differently, all these promoters do. And I do think one improvement that has been made over the last year is a lot of the promoters started working together. We realize it's an inevitability. There's a lot of facilitation. So what can we do to, help each other and grow together, team up, create a force of power and everything that rises all ships. But the entire concept of if no one's looking at the fact that we are moving a small pool of athletes from one part of the state or one event to the other so that we can have successful events and good competition, something's wrong there. It's
right,
not how it should be. We can't like be so concerned about sending the same damn 50 100 people or whatever. We need
right.
to grow it. So I do think
And
that the
it's
catalyst
also worth
there.
yeah, it's also worth mentioning too that like the higher level an athlete becomes, right?
Mhm.
The stronger, more proficient he gets in the sport, potentially the as he levels up and levels up and levels up, and so does his competitors, he's not going to be able to pull as often, right? So
Sure.
these open divisions, these pro classes, where you want guys like Derek Smith to show up, and and Tom and Mike, and uh, it's not realistic to expect these guys to come out for every tournament because they
Exactly.
do have to favor the bigger tournaments. They have to favor the ones where maybe there's some prize money, or at the very least they're getting sponsored to go there, because we're not rich. I don't most of us, myself included, like I don't have the extra money to just be flying all over the country, and certainly don't even have a lot of extra money to uh, you know go down, leave my gym and go somewhere without having to put money here to have somebody watching the gym. So it's not realistic to think that someone can go to all of these tournaments, and we want to see all these tournaments. Don't get me wrong. I Like you said, I want a tournament. If it's this Saturday, I'd love to see that there's a tournament somewhere in California. And I'd love to see that if now we're getting into what we kind of would consider the season of tournaments, where it's gonna pick up from like here to June, and then well, actually it just doesn't stop really. The only downtime has usually been around December and the first part of January, but I mean we're now covering that. I mean we've got
Yep.
the Christmas tournament, the Kringle, what is it called?
Chris Kringle pull. Yep.
Chris Kringle Bowl. Yeah, I was going to say it right. Okay, so we have that, and then we're going to be doing our tournament again for late November, the Pullock Press, and then early November there's the finals here in San Diego for the World Series of Arm Wrestling. So there's something going on already, at least every couple of months somewhere in California. And
Right.
it's my hope that there would be something maybe every 2 weeks somewhere in California, and especially for us, like if we're gonna grow arm wrestling the way that I want to grow arm wrestling here, we pretty much have to have something at least every month for the arm wrestlers here, because especially a lot of these new ones, like they're not going to travel because they won't need to, right? They don't need to step outside the pool of arm wrestlers that they have access to. They've got enough guys that they're trying to beat just within their community here. It's the more advanced lifters that might need to travel and find those guys that have leveled up.
Right. And see, there's the perception I'm talking about here that I really appreciate, because again, this falls back to what you were saying. The focus needs to be new arm wrestlers. It needs to be amateurs and stuff like that. A lot of us, we need to stop and think, is it are we dumbing down the sport and the top level, the high level, by putting this expectation to want to move them and give them this expectation to be at every single event versus respecting what they've accomplished to get where they are. And their path might be a little bit different. But what we really need is to see more new people at more events. And what strategically we can do to do that. I know that's kind of my personal big effort as well to during 2025 is to find ways to do more outreach and work with more people like yourself to do that. And you wanting to do those showdown events, the free events, I think what better way, sure, you're going to have more of the prestigious paid events and stuff where maybe you can offer prize money and things like that. But it's those showdown events that you're offering for free, just the same as the last one I went to. Like there was people I didn't know that their hat in the ring for that, and that's special. That's important. The more of those we can do, it's like an investment. Do we, as a sport, want to keep following the same thing that has a ceiling here, or do we want to take whatever opportunities we can to plant seeds and raise that ceiling?
You have with the free tournaments, you have a lower barrier of entry, and that's where my thoughts are. Because like arm wrestlers, they're all different types of economic and financial levels, right? Like everyone from middle class, blue collar, workers to executives, people who maybe don't even have to work, or whatever the case. But it's all different sort of economic groups. So for the most part, I think it's largely people who are living maybe paycheck to paycheck. They certainly can't afford high entry levels into tournaments. But the reality for the promoter too is that it's like you can't run a good tournament, an efficient tournament, without charging at least $50 per arm. If you're charging less than that, you can't really promise prize money. You can't even maybe afford to get the referees have to be volunteers, and I don't think referees should have to be volunteers, especially if there's money being paid into a tournament. The referee should get paid, and that's something that I've always wanted to make sure that we did. Now, there's been situations where tournaments didn't go well, and the referees that we had offered to, do it for free, and I pushed back on that. I still wanted to pay them, but there was a couple that insisted that wouldn't take my money, and while I appreciate they're looking out for me, it's still my objective to make sure that these guys get paid. I do think that that's important because we don't want to burn them out. To that point too, like we also need to level up people within our clubs as referees. Every club out there could have 3, 4, 5 referees, if nothing else, to even run their own showdowns in their area, or to run mock tournaments, to practice ready goes, everything. Like if you're in the sport for any amount of time, you need to step up and at least be a down ref. Like I don't particularly like being a head ref too much. It's very stressful and frustrating for me. I prefer to be a down ref myself. But even as a promoter, you may get into that position sometimes. You may have to.
Yep. Yeah, definitely. When I did the Mountain King up here in November, I was just really blown away at how hard it was to find certified refs in this massive state that we live in. Just a huge state with a ton of clubs. Like how many states have as many teams as we have in it, So I was really, really surprised with that, and I couldn't agree more. But yeah, I've talked to a lot of teammates. Like we all just need to get certified. I know that the athletes who are more on the athletics, that they're more competing, right? Those who have gotten certified at some level to ref, they all attest the same thing. It makes them a better arm wrestler. Knowing the rules and getting trained, it helps.
It does, but also be aware of the fact that I can think of a few really great arm wrestler athletes who became referees who almost never referee anymore because they got burned out on it too, because it's like they don't want people to know that they're a referee because they got burned out. They were asked all the time.
Too much demand.
That's a sign that there's not enough referees.
Not enough.
We need more referees. Certainly, if they're certified, that would be really great. But even if they did their due diligence and did a lot of practicing and working with some of those certified referees to make sure that they are a good referee, that if the certified referees could at least certify them as a down rep, and then, be training them and working with them so that they can go get certified and then level up. I had the pleasure of watching, some of these referees. Crispin comes to mind, watching him develop into that head ref position, being a down ref for some time. And this is a guy that, we all know him locally here, but he's very passionate about arm wrestling. And for him to want to take the time to be a certified ref and put in the work to do that, I really appreciate that. And I use him as much as we can. We always call him in for help, and we pay him, of course. And I think he was very appreciative of the fact that, I came to him and I said, it's time for you to head ref. And he's like, really? And it's like, yeah. You're ready. It's like, you're moving up now. You're gonna head ref. And of course we have some amazing guys already that are head refing, like Vosgin and Alex who are certified. Paul Stevens, who wants to get certified, but is probably refereed as much as just about any certified referee. And then of course we have, some of the guys, the other guys that are local that have been doing it for years, who are great, locals in Southern California. But some of them just don't referee as much anymore. And that's fine. I think a lot of it is because, they've done it for so many years and they're ready to pass that torch on. So hopefully we can see them coming out or maybe even getting on the level where they can certify those referees. I would love to see that. I'd love to see Vosgin. I know he's mentored some referees, but I'd love to see him running certifications, training people, whatever you have to do to sign up on these people and say, this is a good referee. Vosgin would be the person for that, because he's very, very particular, right? There's been calls that, he wasn't wrong, but I certainly didn't like this call because it was on me, It was like, it cost me the match, but that's the reality of having somebody who's really good and catches what needs to be taught and makes it fair for everybody. And as much as we're friends, he doesn't play favorites. Someone might think otherwise, and maybe some other people have different opinions, but I can't see it. I've never seen him do anything that wasn't fair. And I feel the same about all the refs that we use. So we're very fortunate in that.
That's very true. Yeah. I haven't really seen bias. Especially amongst our certified head refs. They're all good. We just need them to mentor more people. But, obviously it's going to start with more people showing an active interest in doing that. So I think a lot of that's going to start at the clubs, team leaders and stuff. They really, I think, need to motivate, their team to get out there and do it. But I think some good things could be happening with that in 2025. We'll see. We're realizing that as a community that we need more refs. Now that ranking is becoming more and more of an important factor in our state for driving the growth of our sport. I think we're all seeing the need for that, which brings up a question to me. I love asking people this question, Dave. Where do you see the sport, let's say for you, 3 years, where do you see the sport being in 3 years from now? If we could, all do things in a proactive, positive way.
Well, predictions are tough. I can take an optimistic approach on that prediction, but be, be sure that, like, when I'm saying this, it's like, it isn't all on me. Like, I can only do what I can do, right?
Mhm.
So I would love to consistently run these 4 paid tournaments that we do each year, and be able to get the prize money up on those to where we're roughly seeing people walk away with, if they're winning a class, that they're at least doubling their entry to be in that class. And the overall would be somewhere along the lines of, $500 to $1,000 for an overall, so that we could draw, some of the at least some of the bigger local competitors to come out and take that money. As it is right now, we usually do about $250 per arm. So if they win both arms, they can walk away with $500. It's not a huge amount of money, but to offer more than that, pay my refs, and put good medals in the hands of all those that won their class, there really isn't a whole lot of wiggle room. So that's something that we're working to improve, but there's only so much we can do to trim the fat on that side. And I'd
Right.
like to be able to offer our referees even more. I'd like to make sure that I have more referees. I don't like, even in a 5-hour tournament, I don't like my referees to have to stand there for more than a couple hours. I like to see them rotate out. And but that does mean that we have to have more certified refs. And in order to grow the sport, we also need a lot more new arm wrestlers. And so what I see happening, or would like to see happen over the next 3 years, is that what I'm doing here locally, or plan to do locally here, to draw out more new arm wrestlers, is that other areas, other pockets, at least within Southern California, will follow suit and do the same thing. Now, it's already happening to a large extent in your area, in your former area with Derek, the Riverside area, the San Bernardino area has gone and grown a huge group of amateur arm wrestlers. Many of them have moved up into competition, although I see that there's a lot who probably still haven't competed in competition. And so I would really love to see a Riverside showdown, or Inland Empire showdown once or twice a year, to be able to solidify a club, like, preference, if you will, some bias that, like, you're not just hanging out, that you're training for something, and that there's training involved, and we'll get to that as well too. But it's not just a club of people, getting together. One of the terms that I've heard before is that it's like a drinking club with an arm wrestling problem, right?
Yeah.
And like, I don't know how much drinking goes on, at your practices, but, there are practices where people get together and they smoke and they drink, and they've done that for years. And that's fine if that's what people want to do. But as an athlete, in multiple strength sports, I feel that there has to be a certain discipline to the strength sport. If you really want to grow and you really want to be better in the sport, then you pay attention to the food that you put in your body, and you train your body to be able to handle, not only to get stronger, to get more endurance, be able to have the stamina to do well in your sport throughout the whole tournament, but also to be able to heal. I mean, we're constantly taking so much wear and tear in all the way to our fingers, thumbs, wrists, elbows, of course, everybody knows that, and shoulders. My shoulders have had extensive damage from all the things that I've done, but certainly from arm wrestling has been a big part of that. And so this is why training becomes really important. So part of the 3-year plan, if you will, is that we're looking at, the appropriate level of training, the nutrition support that people need in order to be able to not only gain the muscle and have the fuel that they need to be the best at their sport, but so they can be leaner too. I mean, how do you drop 15 pounds to make your class? Are you doing it through starvation, or are you doing it through like a structured nutrition plan over a course of time where you can lose the excess body fat and get to a point where you're not depleted, you're still strong, and you're still able to compete and do what you want. I mean, we look at the top level guys, Michael Todd, he's a master at like putting weight on, taking weight off. Obviously, so is Devin. But these guys don't do any of that and then have an effective performance. Not that I've seen. Like they're top level regardless of what weight class they're at, and they're masters at the craft. And I think it's important to be able to not only learn from them, but for our community to be able to learn from the people within the community that understand the importance. And like you said in the beginning, like I've been training people for over 30 years, 33 years now. I've been a licensed sports nutritionist for over 20 years, a master licensed sports nutritionist for at least, more than a decade. And so my ability to transform bodies is well documented, both with athletes and with the general population. I have arm wrestlers that I've helped lose weight and still maintain their strength and their stamina as well with all other strength sports. And so I feel that confident that with the right training, the right nutrition, supplementation where it's appropriate, we can get people to perform better at lower weight so that they can be more competitive in the weight classes as they move up from that novice to amateur to that open and pro division. And when I say it like that, it's like there has to be levels to arm wrestling. And it's very difficult as a promoter, if you're putting a competition, even the free competition that we did this weekend, it was like there was just one class. It was a men's class. It was, men's right, men's left. These are the weight classes, and we had multiple weight classes. But if you're running a competition where you're not charging a lot, or you're doing it free like the showdowns, then you're not going to be able to have a lot of classes, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. But as we move into higher levels, we're talking about national level competitions and world level competitions. When you go to these competitions, there's so many classes. There's so many weight divisions. It's like a weight division for every 10 pounds. And then the experience level would vary, to a great degree, depending on, whether people qualify for that or not. But,
Right.
I think that, having even locally, if you can draw enough people, my vision for those 3 years is that we would have multiple classes or multiple divisions, like a novice class, an amateur class, an open division, and then a pro class. And the pro classes would probably be, the smallest classes in the event, because it's really drawing out people almost, and it's almost more of a match style, where it's like a super match or a like a card, what do you call it in fighting, the prize card or whatever it is.
Right.
More of like that
Solidified one-on-one combat match for sure. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. And the success of the tournament itself will solidify the ability to bring those pros out as well too, and they could even play a hand in that. I mean, I'm not opposed, and I don't think any promoter should be opposed to partnering with some of those top level pros to get them out for some of those super matches. I mean, why not give maybe pay for their either their transportation to get there, their airfare, whatever it is that they need to get to your location, and then give them a stake in the tournament. Give them a percentage of the tournament so that they have that much more at stake to promoting and get people to come out. Maybe they even come out a day earlier or a day later so that they can do a seminar and make some extra money doing that as well too. And if it's properly structured, which I see no problem being able to do that. I've ran seminars for almost as many years as I've been a nutritionist. So, I think that running a seminar, at least structuring it to where I could partner with, a top level arm wrestler who maybe has no experience in running a seminar. I could get him the guide him through that process so he could make some money, and our community would be, excited to have him come out.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that the paid tournaments and the more, your prestigious things like King of Cali, UAL State Championship, I think those free tournaments cater to that, to create a better attendance at those larger, more prestigious paid tournaments. Because when I see a free tournament like you're talking about, I see that specifically farming and catering to getting new arm wrestlers in our sport. So I can say for a fact, that Alpha Empire's huge. We are primarily made up of amateurs, a ton of them. And I can tell you right now, like the last few paid tournaments that we've had that go around the standard rate, I go to each team member, each amateur. Are you ready to go compete? Are you ready to go do this? This is where you're going to get experience. This is where you're going to learn. This is what matters. And I can't count how many of them say, I can't afford to go to a tournament where I'm going to go lose, you know? And that's well, I mean, if it was just about being afraid to going and losing, I'll chew them out for sure. But if they can't afford it, and that factor's being brought into play too, it makes sense. But so what better of an opportunity for all these new people that need competition experience? They're not going to sit there and, train for 5 years and then suddenly show up to a tournament and kill everybody. They need to compete. So I think those two things go hand in hand, and any promoter who runs these type of events, I think it could play to their advantage to contribute to things like that as well. Find ways to make
I'll explain it this way too, for promoters, so that they can understand the value in these free tournaments.
Right.
Hopefully just convey an understanding there, because like you said, you do have all these people who, a lot of them are saying like they can't afford to go to a tournament, they can't afford to lose. There's a few reasons why they're saying these things. There's some subtext in what they're saying, and I'll get to that as well. But from a marketing standpoint, you want to develop a funnel, okay? And so a funnel means that you're getting as many people in at the top with the lowest barrier of entry as possible, okay? Mm-hmm. So getting someone to come out for an arm wrestling practice or some training on arm wrestling, maybe it's like a safety clinic or something like that. You make those things free, right? You can even make videos or do webcasting and podcasts to draw people in. That could be your free part of your funnel as well too, but you have to have something along those lines to draw people in, right? And so where they're at, they're coming in with lowest barrier of entry into this free thing. Now, when they get in and they get into the funnel, and there's the trust that they're developing, they're building, they're having fun, right? Even when things aren't fun, nobody likes to lose, but you can still have fun when you're not having fun, because there's the opportunity to grow, and that's what people have to understand about this sport. Like, there's no way to get up here and to level up unless you take those hits, right? And those hits go all the way down the pad, and they go really fast and really hard, and they leave you really sore and really embarrassed because people are posting up their wins on you, but that's the reality of the sport. And hopefully you're willing to suffer through that part of it so you can get to the best part of it. And there's not a single one of us, right? You look at the top level up there, there's not a single one of us, no matter how long we've been in the sport and no matter how much we've leveled up, that doesn't have to deal with those losses, right?
Yep.
Look at Devin dealing with his losses right now. Look at Michael dealing with his losses. But they deal with it like a champion, right? Because they have that championship mindset and that champion heart that give that perseverance, the drive and the desire to move through. Now, if you want to develop that, you can't do that sitting on the sidelines. You can't do that just going to practices, right? That's a start, but you have to move. If you want to level up, you're not. This is a sport of hands, right? And you've got to get your hands on as many hands as possible, because styles make all the difference. And you arm wrestling with the same guys, if it's not a big enough pool, you're not learning maybe what you need, or maybe the guys who are pulling with you on a regular basis, maybe they're holding back on, and they know something that they could tell you to do, but they don't want to tell you. You go to another practice over here somewhere, and these guys are spilling the beans and telling you, hey, you need to do this, hey, you need to do that. I like to tell people immediately after I beat them, I'll tell them exactly what I did. Hey, like I cheated on you. I did this and I did that, and I didn't get a win or whatever. Because no one, not no one, but hardly anybody was telling me that back in, when I first got it started. Because everybody just wanted to beat the big strong guy that could curl 120-pound dumbbells. Yeah, let's just smash him to the pad and put that up on video. And not in a mean way, but like that's just, you know, what people do. And I think that going back to what you were saying about someone saying like, I can't afford to go there and lose, right? Well, then you can't afford to win, right? Because you have to lose in order to win. And you have to get out of that trap of thinking that you have to look good, right? That you have to, I mean, go on the line, search Dave DePew online. You're not going to find a lot of videos of me winning, right? Because I mean, I've won matches where it counted, and I've got, you know, some medals to show for it, you know, some third places, second places, first places, and you know, as a result of me continuing to get up to the table and take those hits, take those losses. That's the only way that it happens. I've fought for so long to get UAO gold. That was like when I finally could put a gold medal up there, when I could finally win Buena Park, you know, all of those little things. And I wasn't beating, you know, the greatest guys in arm wrestling to get there. You know, I mean, the greatest guys locally, certainly not the greatest guys, but I wasn't beating the top guys. But I managed to stay within the top 10 for many, many years within the sport. And that's still while juggling my participation in other strength sports, you know. So, and I'll say this too, if you really want to be serious about arm wrestling, you've got to be serious about arm wrestling. You can't really be, you can dabble a little bit in some of these other sports, but your focus has to be primarily on arm wrestling, right? Mm-hmm. And that's certainly been one of the biggest criticisms from some of the top pullers, and who are my friends, who are telling me like, Dave, you need to focus more on arm wrestling, get the table time, and they're not wrong. But you know, I'll just put that out there that if you do want to get really good at the sport, then you need to get a lot of hands. You need to go to a lot of different practices, not your own practices. But most importantly, you have to start competing. I got to a point where I felt pretty confident that I could maybe win in a tournament because of the guys I was pulling in practice, and it was mostly slow pulling. And then I go to a tournament, you grip up, and all of a sudden you're over here, and you're like, I don't even know what's going on. It took some time before things started to slow down enough where I could figure it out. And I realize it's my style. I'm not a quick guy off the go, right? So I'm more of a defensive puller, but I've started to learn what I need to do in order to be able to pull and be defensive. Now, maybe even for me, more practice and more traveling would give me an opportunity to be able to even be a better arm wrestler and maybe be a better arm wrestler on the go. I've seen, we were talking with Gabe and Kyle about this today, we're having a conversation about this, is that, you know, Gabe has leveled up so much, right? And he's frustrated. He came home, did some pulling in that tournament. He didn't do as well as he wanted to do. And I told him, I said, hey, it's not because you're not stronger. You are stronger. And it's not because you haven't gotten better as an arm wrestler, because you continue to get better as an arm wrestler. Our guys here are getting better too, you know, but you're doing good by traveling and getting the practice. When Kyle went around and traveled and did the arm wrestling and took the hits that he did and learned from a lot of people, he leveled up quite a bit as an arm wrestler as well. And he was being trained since he was 14 by world champions, right? So it's not that he didn't have people in his ear telling him the right things. It's just sometimes you have to hear it from different people, and you have to feel different hands. You have to get different setups, because that is, if you want to level up, if you want to be a better arm wrestler.
Definitely. Yeah, very well said. I think there's perceptions as athletes, like what your goal is, how you're really viewing competition. So you know, it's a very typical thing for amateurs and brand new people to struggle with that concept of losing, and ego and stuff like that. So with my time in, I'm at a place where, yeah, I'm pulling open, and a good amount of tournaments that I'll go and enter in, I feel like if I just compete my weight class, I have a potential of getting first place. I feel like I have that potential in a lot of tournaments to be able to get first place in my weight class. But because my perception is a little different, I feel like I've got too much further to go. There's too much more to learn, too much more to get better. So I jeopardize that by competing in multiple classes. Why? Because I want experience. Why? Because I'm not afraid to lose to a 205 guy. And then have that cost me being fresh enough for the 165s. I got to learn, and slowly progress. Um, Barring injury, everybody knows where they're at and everything, and where they can protect themselves. But yeah, there is a perception, and I do believe when people can start to embrace the long game in this sport and really commit themselves to that, their path to growth and getting better just might be expedited. If the path is just to win and to pick tournaments and classes that you think you can win at, you might be staying at that level for quite some time until you are willing to lose.
You have to battle test all your games. I mean, you're going to go to the gym and you're going to, be putting in the time. You're going to be putting in the reps on, whether it's, cables, bands, kettlebells, dumbbells, uneven dumbbells, hammers, clubs that you're swinging around, whatever you're doing to develop the fingers, the different types of grips, whether it's, crushing grips, support grip, whatever it is that you're working, your wrist rollers, all those things, right? You can get stronger and you can level up on all those things. Put the straps on your hand and, pull this way and do this. And, those things are objective things that we can test. And we can see that we're getting stronger. We can see that we get leveled up, right? But you have to battle test, right? Like everybody else is doing things too, right? So when it comes down to it, like how do you handle the pressure of competition, right? If you really struggle with the competition, if you're doing really well on the practice table and you're really sucking at competition, well, you're never going to get better at competition unless you go out and compete, right? So don't compete less, compete more. You're probably, if you're just doing this the whole time, in competition, well, then you definitely get back in there because you're probably not in the fight long enough to really do any damage anyway. So get in there and compete and put the work in, get the reps in the competition and take the hits because it's the only thing that's going to really make all the difference.
Yeah, well, everybody, you heard it here. Dave owns a gym and is heavily involved in strength sports and gym stuff. And you heard it right there. You want to get better at arm wrestling, you better start arm wrestling. There's a few good chats in here on this subject. I'll go ahead and read them out. First off, welcome Atlantis IRL. Good to see you back here. So Todd Colazzo says you have to get your losses out of the way. This was one of the first pieces of advice that Derek Smith gave to us. Yes.
Nice.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's one of Derek's fundamentals that he teaches every new person that comes in is, yeah, if you want to get better at arm wrestling, you got to get out there and arm wrestle. You got to compete. You got to be willing to lose, and it's tough. It's tough with a lot of people. We also got Neil's index finger says, losses mean so much. It's how we know the corrections that have to be made to improve. I really, really like what you just said there. That's so true because when I tell my teammates and everything that aren't competing that they're probably going to get more out of one competition than they will 10 to 15 practices or whatever, what that really equates to for me is those losses. A lot of times you might win and realize what you did right, but just as valuable taking a loss, you realize, oh, I'm like reacting to everything, I'm not initiating anything, or oh, my hand and wrist keeps getting buckled, or whatever it is. And so now you know what to productively actually practice. When before you were just practicing, you were just throwing darts at the wall. But now you actually know how to apply your training. We got Mike Lindner in the house as well, my teammate. Hope you're doing well, Mike. He's man, Mike is good. Like all of us, we're behind him big time. He's made a lot of noise in California this last year. And Todd Colazzo says, "What's up, Mike? How are you feeling?" So yeah, Mike's been injured. He competed several classes at the Kringle Pull, and he's been trying to get himself back to health. which I'd like to bridge into another conversation here, if you don't mind. Well, hold on one second. The Drew says, as Bowen said to seek the losses until you can't find them anymore. I dig that, man. That's cool right there.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. So,
Absolutely.
Dave, I started reading your article on strengthening
Yeah.
tendons, just everything about tendons. Very, very interesting stuff. And I only bring this up now because I do feel like it relates to injuries, and I do see a lot of guys that are strong in the gym but not quite conditioned for arm wrestling get hurt a lot. I'm not saying that's the case for Mike. Mike just does everything a lot, and I can't respect him more. But it was a lot of fascinating stuff in there that I read. And I think I got down to the portion where you start discussing. So I got through a lot of the clinical stuff and explanations of things, and then I got down to the strengthening portion and fortifying of those tendons. Sounded like a lot of eccentrics, holds, and one of the interesting things I found too was there was a little bit of explosiveness that you were explaining in that as well. Specific exercises that could be done, but things where you're actually putting a little bit of impact, like
Yeah.
strategic on your
And
tendon.
when you're being explosive too, let me add to that. When you're being explosive on your training, it is going to be important that the loads are lighter, right?
Right.
So you can't expect to be explosive on the heaviest loads, where you can have maybe a lot of force that you have to overcome initially, but your leverages have to improve quite a bit, or you have to be working within that arc of the degree in which you're moving with a lot of velocity in order to be safe, right? Now, inevitably, arm wrestling, we know that we could be moving into that, and then all of a sudden there could be something that puts the brakes on. So we have to find a way to train for that as well too. But when you're training muscle, right, and you're doing the slow eccentrics for the muscle, and you're holding out here, that lengthened portion of the phase of your muscle, this is where you're going to have the greatest potentiation for the mechanical tension to make the most difference in eliciting a growth response into the muscle. And this is now proven in the more current scientific literature. Go look up Schoenfeld, Brad Schoenfeld, or even just read the articles on the website. And I reference these studies and these brilliant people who are doing all of this work to verify, validate what so much of us already expected or had tested in our own training and knew. But you're going to get bigger biceps and bigger forearms with those slow eccentrics, but you're also going to be able to create those fibril growth within the tendons to be able to have that, to challenge that collagen growth, so that you can have thicker and stronger and stiffer tendons. And that's really important for the sport of arm wrestling. But we also want to do, in my website, I refer to this quite a bit if you look at some of the explosive stuff. It's the post-activation potentiation. And this, when we train under the controlled heavy loads, then we follow that up within that same session. We follow that up with some explosive stuff. But the explosive stuff is not at the same degree in which we're loading for our eccentrics. It's important to be able to understand that. There will be some shear and things that you will put yourself into primarily safe positions, so that you can develop the routine use of the muscles within the desired technique. However, there are going to be some times with even lower loads and lower resistance, where you want to get in vulnerable positions and you want to strengthen some of those connections too, just in case you end up going there, right? And I would caution most people starting out in arm wrestling, and even those early amateurs, if you're new to arm wrestling, you've been in the sport for less than 3 years, let it go. If you're in a really bad vulnerable position, right, just take the loss. Right? Focus on getting yourself at the start, getting in a good position and staying in a good position, even losing in a good position. But if you get in a bad position, a really vulnerable position, it takes a long time for this connective tissue to be able to repair. And if you want to be able to avoid some very serious injuries, it's important that you stay in good positions. And it's important that you train, not just on the table, but you have to put the reps in with the equipment, with the bands, with the weights, and all of those things too. I have to emphasize that as much as I emphasize that you need to be practicing and getting the time on the table and doing the competition. So it is my hope to be able to provide this information in the article format primarily, because that allows me, I'm not saying this to be grandiose, and I'm not saying this to blow myself up or anything like that. It's just there's so much freaking information that I consume that in order for me to really organize these thoughts, I want to write about it, and I want to put it down and create a structure for putting that information out. And the more I do that, I feel like the better I get at being able to explain it and transmute that information and disseminate that information to people as well. And because I don't consider myself a very good speaker with, in that, like, my thoughts are bouncing around. I'm trying to, think of what I'm going to say next. And, that's 15 minutes from now, unfortunately, and then draw it back to this very moment. And I get distracted by things that are going on. And then I forget where I was, So, read the articles. If you notice at the end of every article, there's the contact link. People can read the article. They can send me an email. They can ask questions. If I don't have the time, or I will take the time to respond to your email. But, if I can't answer the question immediately in that email, just know that I'm going to do an article about it. If it's a good enough question, either I'm going to provide you a link to somewhere where I've already written about that subject, or I'm going to write about that subject because it's something that I love to do.
Very cool. Yeah, I really like that you referenced a lot of stuff in the article. That's always helpful. But yeah, you could tell that you were consolidating so much information into something that could be translated, and it was translated really, really well. I like the way you broke it down in sections and preface some of the areas before we got into like the meat of things. But yeah, you're a very articulate writer. I'm pretty picky when it comes to things that I read, and it's very well written. So anybody that wants to go check out some of Dave's articles, that's going to be on grindergym.com, correct?
Yes, grindergym.com. You can go into the search bar. It's better. Everything's viewable from the mobile site. It's a lot easier to navigate from your website, from your web browser. You can find the search bar. You can still find it on the mobile, but you have to really scroll down to find it. I developed this site myself. I'm not a web developer, but I developed this site myself. I maintain the site myself, and so there's articles that I've put up in the past that I didn't have header images for, and so some of those aren't going to have header images. Not that matters too much, for most people, but, I'm a visual person. I like to be able to have that. There's articles I want to go back on and provide graphs. There's articles, many articles that I want to create videos for, and even provide hyperlinks within those articles to the videos, and then provide, of course, when we do a video, provide reference back to those articles, which I'll give you the link. Oh, you have the link. You can even add that link to this video, so that people can reference the article that we're talking about. So initially I did an article. I released them on the same day. I believe I did, same day, or maybe day apart. But one of the articles was just on the subject of training developing the tendons for growth, right? So that, unfortunately, there's not a whole lot of peer-reviewed studies on tendon growth. Most of what's out there is primarily focused on repair, and largely in the physical therapy set, there's some protocols there for repair, but doesn't follow through to the extent where you're trying to get someone to return to the same level of performance that they were at, prior to the injury. It's more about a lifestyle. Let's get them to where they can actually use their arm. So That being said, if you're an arm wrestler and you break your arm, you want to be able to return to the sport. Most of what's has been out there is not really providing you the information that you need for that objective.
Mhm.
So my intent is to provide you that information and provide those that don't want to get their arm broke all the tools and information they need in order to prevent that. Because I think that if we can provide that information and make it easily accessible to people, then and they are interested in the sport, and that's where things start. Before someone commits to being involved in the sport, first they're interested, right? So that this is going into which I like to cover a lot too, is human behavior. And one of the important things to consider is that people will think about something for a very long time, right? Which is what's great about this webcast and podcast that you're doing. And hopefully you'll continue to do this, and I'm happy to come back and be on this as well. But the interest part of it is you can capture a lot of people. We talked earlier about low barrier of commitment. This doesn't cost anything, an internet connection and a device to watch it on. So you can watch these videos, and most people do. I meet people, by the time I meet people now, they've consumed so many videos. They watch so much with Devin Lorette and Michael Todd and all these other arm wrestlers and the podcasts and things like that. So it's working. It's working because people need to be able to, show that interest and get something for their interest. They need to investigate. So I'm creating the articles. I hope people will continue to create the videos. I'll eventually create more videos. I'm happy to come on to anyone else's podcasts and provide information, whether it's about arm wrestling or if it's about nutrition, training, whatever. I'll take the time to do that because this is a passion of mine, and I want to be able to grow the sport and grow really all strength sports, but I really want to grow arm wrestling. And I feel like it's a sport that, the sky's the limit. Because everybody can arm wrestle, right? Like, you unless you don't have arms, you don't have hands, unfortunately, then maybe you're not going to be able to participate then, right? But or we'll have augmented arm wrestling sports, right? If you don't have an arm, then you could use an Android arm and fight it out that way.
Oh boy,
wouldn't that be something? No, but
have you seen that video of the guy with like the robo arm wrestling, Tony Tomlinson, I think?
Oh no, I haven't seen that. I would love to see that.
It's a trip. You can find it.
Well,
right. Call it YouTube Tony Tomlinson. It's going to be one of the top videos. Some like engineer created like a hydraulic arm.
I did see that. See that in the hydraulic. Okay, I did see that. Yeah,
pretty cool.
That's crazy. No, can you imagine two of those together, right? That's the thing. You get to engineer your arm under certain specs, and then you come and compete. Like those monster, remember those remote control things? They called them monster something or whatever, and they crash into each other and destroy each other.
Yeah, what was that called? Like Robo Wars or something.
Maybe somebody in the chat. Maybe somebody in the chat knows. But anyway, so we can grow this sport, and there's a lot of opportunities to be able to do that. And for me, I can really hopefully play well to my strengths, and writing is the easiest thing for me to do. I'm constantly now taking notes. I'm constantly writing things, and I'm constantly putting out, publishing articles. But there's so many more articles that I write that don't even make it to the editing stage. So there's a lot of information, and I'd love to be able to, get people to come out, check those out, comment on them, email me, ask me to come on your podcast if you want to do a podcast. I'll talk about these things. Whatever we have to do to get people informed and get people out of that, contemplation stage where they're interested and now they're contemplating, and get them to making a decision, right? Whatever that decision is. The decision could be come to a tournament. If there's a lot of tournaments, great. Not everybody has to come and compete in a tournament. Maybe they come out and watch. They can come out and spectate. We need spectators, right? We charge a spectator fee now because it's important to charge a spectator fee because we need revenue to have these events be successful, right? So that I don't have to charge an arm wrestler. I won't eventually have to charge an arm wrestler $100 an entry. You know that like most strength sports now, it's $100 to $185
Just to
to
be there.
compete in that strength sport.
Oh,
And arm
really?
wrestlers are still getting to enjoy competing in a tournament for $40 or $50, and some for $15. Right?
Right.
It's absolutely crazy that arm wrestlers are going to expect that they can go and compete at that level, right? Or compete at a high level and not pay to actually enter that competition. Now that's why we have the free tournament, so that we can pull people in. I want these free tournaments to mostly be novice competitors. I don't mind doing open classes. I don't even mind doing pro classes, as long as they understand that when we do an amateur competition, there's not going to be any money, there's not going to be any awards, and we may not be able to have the level of referees, because they're probably going to be people who are at least training to be a referee, so they may not have that same skill level. They may miss some things, but we're going to keep people safe. That's what we're going to be sure of, is that making sure that those new arm wrestlers. We had new arm wrestlers that were there this past weekend. We would have taken the time to make sure that they knew how to properly pull. They knew how to be in the safe positions, and we would make sure that they understood that the match would stop immediately when they weren't in the right position. That is grounds for stopping the match. Because first and foremost, you have to keep people safe. I've had tournaments. My very first tournament, Kyle, my son, he broke a guy's arm, or the guy's arm broke, arm wrestling Kyle, and the one right before that, same thing had happened to me, that a guy had pulled, his arm broke. And so it's not that the refs aren't taught this, but a lot of times they don't feel that they have maybe the support from the community and the support from the promoters to stop the match. And that's something that's had to change. That's something that's been stressed by Harold. That's something that Bill has been very cooperative about, stressing to all his referees as well, that if they're in the bad positions, stop the match. And that's why things have gotten better. That's why we have so fewer injuries in the sport now. The injuries that we're seeing mostly are just the sheer wear and tear, but not as many arm breaks. And that I think is largely due to the confidence that these referees have now, that they have the support of the crowd, they have the support of the promoters to stop those matches.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. Conditioning. The majority of the injuries that I typically see that are pretty bad, that'll set people back a little bit, is usually newer arm wrestlers that especially are strong, but they don't have the conditioning and foundation yet. Maybe not even taught safety, but yeah, that's one of the things that it would be nice to see more information be put out there before. I think Derek does a really great job with it with our team. But because there's the psychology of it is difficult. Okay. Because like on one side, when I was doing like on foot canvassing for the Mountain King event up here, it was important that I like try and get people from the mountain to actually go there, like my local community, right? And so I went to gyms. There'd be a guy doing weighted pull-ups, just jacked and everything. And I'd stop him, show him a flyer. And as soon as he saw the word arm wrestling, he backed up and was like, no, no, no. Like, why? And he's like, dude, I've seen videos. Like, I don't want to break my arm. And I had to talk to him a little bit, and I think I had him kind of like on the fence a little bit more at some point. But yeah, there's that psychology. The part where it gets a little bit tricky to me is the people that are willing to do it. You can also kind of like detour them by putting so much emphasis on safety and the initial conditioning. When they're kind of coming in with it with just this motivation to like be strong and beat people and compete and everything like that, where we don't want to see them get hurt. And so I do see a lot of great coaches take these brand new people and try and coddle them in that way and slow them down from where their mindset is at coming in day one. And I kind of watch them deflate and almost, feel like they're being dismissed, or like that, even that this is boring or something like that. So it's a really hard psychological factor to get across. It's very, very polarizing, I think, the sport in general for new people. but that's a tricky one. I mean, the day one people that I deal with, um, just through kind of understanding and seeing that a lot of times with people, it's difficult, like making an attempt to kind of cater to both sides. Like I want you to have fun today. I want you to have fun and come do what you came to do. We're just gonna
Sure.
we're just gonna focus this way. And they love it also, it seems like when you talk about the safety positions and staying connected and follow your hand, when it's left at that, they almost feel like you're telling them how to arm wrestle weak because you're trying to tell them how to arm wrestle safe. But when they start to be explained that this also translates to more power and strength, and you could even show them what the differentiation of that power feels like, how do I feel out here? And they're like, boom. Well, how do I feel right here? And when they realize it's actually, we're not trying to like keep you down here or anything like that. We're trying to make it better. But
How was it? How was it for you coming into the sport? How was it for you? Did you like what you're sharing with us right now? Was that some of your sentiment, or how did you? How was your approach to that? Were you conscientious of the risks involved with arm wrestling? Were you nervous about arm wrestling, or did you jump into it and you're like, I don't want to do all the safety shit? Like, what was it for you?
me, not at all. No. But I mean, I'm a little weird, but like when I had arm wrestled my whole life, and I was just one of those guys that had a kind of a typical story, was pretty good at it in the casual basis parties and stuff like that. Um, but I also like knew that, I'm a tradesman. I have a lot of long time athletic background and stuff like that. So I feel like I think I had a really good awareness of where my limits are and stuff like that. I don't think I even recognized whether or not I had, tendon conditioning or anything like that. But no, it didn't really concern me. That hasn't been my experience hasn't been the same with a lot of the newer people that I deal with. But part of it was almost a test because when I came to Alpha Empire day one, my thing was like a couple days before I went to Alpha Empire, we had a birthday party at our house, and there was this really large guy there, and somehow after people were having drinks, we were talked into having an arm wrestling match. I win, and then Malia was like really like, so she didn't understand like the physics of that, like how does that happen? And I thought about it for a minute. I'm like, that's like usually how it goes. I wonder how deep that rabbit hole goes. So I wanted to see what the organized sport looked like, found Alpha Empire and went to their practice and got humbled really quickly. There's Derek Smith there. There's these guys that actually train in the sport, and and that for so a lot of people would have left that day if they were me. But for me, I would have left if I went there and smashed everybody. It was because of the fact that I went there and got humbled. I realized, oh, there's more. There's more to go in this, and that fascinated me. But because Derek had been coaching for so long and had invested so much time into new people, he's one of those guys like you come to his practice, and if you want help from him, he's going to spend a bunch of one-on-one time with you. And he's done that for so many people when unfortunately the larger percentage of them they just turn around and quit, and it's an unfortunate thing. So he had gotten to this point, like all the vets of the team. I remember at the end of practice, they sat me down and they said, Kane, you're probably going to quit. You're probably going to quit. Not a lot of people see this sport out. But if you do want to come back, you're welcome to come. And they had some nice warm explanations of things and what the training's going to look like. They wanted me to condition and start in a hook and stuff like that. But it was them telling me that you're probably going to quit. And I said, no, no, we're not quitting. But no, I didn't want to be
Oh,
another one of those.
I know people like that. I know people like you know, you tell them what they're not going to do, and then
Yeah.
so you're one of
Oh, it
those
worked.
people.
It worked. It was like my mom when I was a little kid. She would say, like, "You're so good at taking the trash out," and then you go and take the trash out. Yeah, you got me. You got me, Derek.
Well, whether it was intentional or not, I mean, it's certainly good advice, and I feel like you have to put it out there. You have to tell people that, you know, that, so that they can really manage their expectations. Because a lot of people have these really grandiose ideas. We've seen it. I mean, if you've been in the sport for any length of time, like you'll see people come in thinking that because they're big and strong, because they have big arms, and that they can just best everyone in the sport. I so to tell you, I mean, like, I'll put it back on myself. I mean, when I first met Alan Fisher, and I thought that I was going to beat him, and I really thought I was, because I didn't have a lot of people throughout my life in my adult life, that were even willing to grip up with me and give me a chance to arm wrestle. And anyone I did it was just easy. I just they had nothing for me. And I, throughout high school, middle school, and high school, I arm wrestled, and I was consistently the one that everyone wanted to beat. And so it's that old thing. We look at it now, or look at it now from this perspective as an arm wrestler. It's like, oh yeah, there's so many guys like that. There's so many guys that they're the best in their high school, they're the best in their neighborhood. And but then when they come face to face with an actual arm wrestler, I mean, I was arm wrestling a 26-time world champion. Now,
That's all. That's all.
that's I certainly had some grandiose ideas that I was gonna beat this guy. But I thought too, like I said, I'm curling that 120-pound dumbbell, right? Why would I expect otherwise? This guy, he can't curl a 120-pound dumbbell, But then it's like, you get on the table with him, you grip up with him, and then immediately you realize there's something different here, right? There's something. Even my hands are different now that I've become an arm wrestler. And I've always had big hands, but like they're way thicker. The padding, everything on my hands, to the extent where it's even negatively affecting me in some of my and other aspects and other strength sports. But for developing and strengthening this hand for arm wrestling, it's changed. And I knew when I gripped up with Alan, I was like, ooh, something's different. Something's different. And he wasn't giving me a lot. So when I was pulling on him a little bit and grabbing up with him, I remember this very distinctly, but I was like, I got this guy, And he's like, go when you're ready. and we've heard this before, right? I've said this to other guys too. Go when you're ready, because you don't want to smash them. You want to give them a chance to actually do what they're going to do and get into their power. Mm-hmm. And so he let me do that, and I immediately pulled him down, right? Pulled him down into what I know now is a hook, and I got into my bicep, and I went to go ahead and roll out my shoulder and push him out. He let me go all the way down into here, and then he stopped me, put the brakes on. He flattened out my wrist, and then he goes, look at your hand. And I was like, what? I'm looking at his face, and he goes, look at your hand. And then he smiled with the biggest grin on his face. He goes, and just straightened me out. And I was like, what? What just happened? What just happened? That's not possible.
Yeah.
And immediately I was hooked, man. I was hooked. I hooked him, and then he opened me up. I was hooked, man. I was like, what is going on? How are you this strong? How, like, I do this, like, I can do it. He's like, yeah, I can't do any of that. He's like, he goes, you're stronger for sure. He goes, but I'm specifically strong. And I understood that as a strength and conditioning coach. I'm like, okay, there's specificity in this, sure, right? But I knew there was a lot more to it. I knew there was technique, and with any sport, there's performance, there's technique, there's strategy, and arm wrestling has all of those things. So it makes it a real sport. And so, you know, here he's flattening me out. I'm stronger than him. How does that happen? I said, you got to tell me. You got to teach me. And that's what we do, right, as human beings. We're like, what's the one thing? What's the one thing that I have to do to make this happen, right? Oh, but it's never that easy, right? It's never that simple, right? It's not like, what are you eating to look like that? You know, what's the one thing that I should be eating or not be eating to you know, to look just like you? What's the one exercise I need to get my biceps to grow? I fell into that same trap. I'm like, what is the one thing? And, you know, he was really, you know, frank with me, and he said, you know, it's going to take some time. He goes, I'll tell you what, I'll teach you everything that you need to know in order to arm wrestle and be, you know, I think he said like pretty good or whatever. And he goes, but I need a commitment from you. You commit for 1 year to me, I'll train you, and then you commit to training me. He wanted me to be a strength and conditioning coach for a year, and he would teach me arm wrestling. And so I committed to that, and he committed to me, and he leveled up tremendously. There was a few guys that he had taken some losses to, that he was facing a sort of a time, a turning point in his life at that time. He wasn't by any means, this was 10 years ago. So he's 65, 67 now, I think. So he was, you know, just north of 55 at that time, and he was really starting to feel the lack of recovery. He needed to like hit weights. He'd never really been someone who did a lot of weightlifting. He did condition his arms, like he conditioned trained his tendons the right way with weights, where he did slow eccentrics, isometrics. He did a lot of hit training with light weights, all of which you see mentioned in the article. That's something that, like, you know, I suspected you needed to do for arm wrestling. You suspected that you needed to do for tendon growth, because if you look at Alan Fisher and guys like him that do these things, they have rebar tendons, right? So I suspected that's what needs to be done, but I verified it with the science. I looked into it, and I examined that it all makes sense fundamentally through the scientific literature that's available to us, that this is why it works. So yes, you know, you can be that guy who, you know, thinks that you're gonna win because you got bigger muscles and you're stronger. You're gonna be humbled by the guy who has the skill and who has that specific strength, and more importantly, has that tendon strength. And you know, that's all those things you can get in arm wrestling, but it takes some time. Brett, who's one of our arm wrestlers, he made a comment today, and I won't quote it exactly because I don't remember it exactly, but he was just commenting about how he loves the idea of competing in arm wrestling for a long time by looking at the metrics, where you have so many people who are young in the sport who, as they level up, right, they get older, they get better. They get better like a fine wine. They get better over time. And you look at the top level in this sport, it's consistently the guys who have been arm wrestling a really long time. And so that, if for no other reason, I mean, that should be at least why somebody who wants to chase has a desire to be competitive, you know, on into their 50s and 60s, should at least be considering arm wrestling. If you're another strength sport like strongman, powerlifting, you can still do those sports to some degree, but you're going to have to use considerably lighter weights. We don't. I typically, like if I'm doing a strongman competition, I suspect that if I'm doing a master level competition, I'm not going to have to do a 400-pound stone unless it's at nationals, right? Unless I'm going to world level. And arguably, I'm more of a local strongman guy. I mean, as much as I love the sport, my body is just not going to allow me to probably dynamically hit heavy loads like that. I would have been able to maybe do those things when I was younger, but I'm going to need lighter weights. Whereas arm wrestling, if I were to commit and dedicate more time to that, I could possibly, at least level up to be a high level arm wrestler locally and maybe even compete nationally. I don't know if I'd be getting invitations to East versus West, but certainly there's the chance there, right? There's the opportunity to that, because it's evident in what we see in arm wrestling. We see people consistently leveling up over time, and Brett, made that, mentioned that, and I think that was worth mentioning, that idea, because regardless of where you are in the sport, if you're in it currently and you're getting frustrated, or if you're thinking about getting into the sport and you're listening to this and what we're saying here, and you want to get maybe to a practice or to watch a tournament or compete in a tournament, just know that the losses, we said this before, the losses are things that you're going to have to take, right? But you can take those losses, and you can expect that down the line in the future, you're going to be a much better arm wrestler.
Yep, definitely. Yeah. I believe that there's we were talking about this earlier. For me, so it's, yeah, it takes time, right? For everybody. Like it's you're gonna get better if you're consistent and you take time. I do, however, believe there is a more expedited way. There's no quick way. There's no overnight way. But I do think that a lot of people believe that the expedited route is in the gym, and there's also like a misconception that getting a lot of table time is the path to injury. But I personally believe that's a very westernized way of thinking, because our table time looks so much different than it does in the East.
Yes.
So I know that for myself, I can arm wrestle on a table with humans 4 times a week, but I'm not just like, pulling like a nut. I'm pulling hard, but with purpose and programming on the table with humans as well. There's a couple
that approaches, you have to program your table time,
right?
Because you have to create something that is otherwise very subjective, as far as like how you're pulling, and you have to make that as objective as possible. If I'm working with a sprinter and I tell that sprinter I want to do these 100-yard runs at 40%, and these at 50, and these at 60, and we're building up, and we're training at this percentage of what we consider our top end speed. That's all subjective, right? Unless we're actually tracking their speed and verifying that, and I haven't seen, not that I'm doing a lot of that anymore as a strength and conditioning coach, but I haven't seen a benefit in terms of like forcing somebody into some objective measurement of speed, like tracking their actual speed and measuring that versus like just allowing them to be objective. I think that to be the same thing with arm wrestling. We're not putting devices on their hands or running lasers to monitor how much we assume that there's so much force being produced or whatever. It's just we have assessments. Thanks to guys like Mazurenko, who doesn't get enough credit, but thanks to guys like Mazurenko, who's created, pioneered some amazing tools and implements and testing protocols to handle that part of it, the objective part of it. The subjective part of it, it's there's too many nuances there. Like whether you're being honest with yourself, right? Are you even being honest with the person that you're pulling with? I'm only going 30%. Like, yeah, your 30 feels like 60, buddy. Like, ease up, or like you're gonna have to trust the people that you're pulling with if you're going to use table time as programming, right? And
and I don't mean in place of gym. Yeah, the gym is a great place to track your numbers and get stronger in a way that you can track. Of course, the big difference in that sport I find is like, so if you're training in like strongman or whatever to be strong, a lot of those lifts are going to directly translate through. But I'm just talking about the conditioning of the sport, just the micro nuances that are involved in arm wrestling a human, and the
in strength sport, we would refer to that as like technique training. Like you have to, as I said earlier, you have to, in order to get good at the sport, you have to grip up, you have to have hands, and you have to feel things out. You just don't have to feel those or get all of that at a high level of force. And that's a negotiation. I think by large too, that means, balancing out your training where, say you have a 165-pound arm wrestler who, you're maybe as a super heavyweight, you're much stronger than him, right? And your 40% or your 50% is maybe close to his 90%. Well, that makes you guys really good training partners for that day. If he needs to be in the 90%, you need to be roughly around the 40 to 50%, right? So that's how you figure things out. If there's some way of being able to negotiate that, like I'm coming to the practice. This is what I'm looking for today. I'm looking for an opportunity to just do some defensive pulling, just catching, holding, while other people are, continuing to shift and change and, overcome that, right? If you look and you see Devin travels the country to let people beat up his arms. So he does a lot of defensive pulling and holding and all of these things because he gets it. He knows, he understands that he has to have that table time, but he needs the conditioning that only comes from pulling with actual arms. The nuances are endless.
Right.
Yeah. So it's good that you're spending that time on the table. It's just really important to also mention so that people understand. It's like that's not full force. Grinding it out with somebody, for an hour, 2 hours, 4 times a week. Now, don't get me wrong, some people might be able to do that, but they're probably not going to be able to do that and get better at the sport. They're probably staying maybe right where they are.
Right. Yeah. So Mike Lindner, who, we were talking about, he got hurt earlier. He explained how. He said he got hurt after adding weightlifting. Now, that's something that's new. He was primarily a table time person. What are your thoughts on that? Because I'm an advocate for weightlifting, but just like your table time,
you have to know how to appropriately load. I mean, anybody can get hurt weightlifting, but
arm wrestling.
There's a weightlifting. You get hurt weightlifting. It's appropriate load, appropriate volume, frequency. You can get really excited about the gains, the newbie gains that you're making in the gym, and you can push it hard, and you can end up being injured. You throw in performance enhancing drugs into that, and it increases the likelihood that you're going to be injured. So, I mean, whether it's on the arm wrestling table or it's in the weight room, there's always risk. There's always possibility, especially with sports that are a lot more risky, like strongman, or powerlifting, where you're lifting maximum loads. But to get back to what we were talking with Mike, for him to have the table time and be training and putting in the work and then go to the gym and experience maybe some injuries, it's not likely that it's the result of the gym, what he's specifically doing in the gym. It's the accumulation of both, right? That it may have pushed him over the edge, right? So if he trains hard on the table and then he goes to the gym and he trains hard, that's like adding an extra, day of max effort. And almost, there's very few situations where someone isn't going to experience at least some minor injury as a result of that. And if you have a minor injury, and you're training through that, and then you go to a competition, it's going to become a serious injury. And that's what's important to consider too for people, is that when they are training up for something and they start getting to that point where their recovery is diminished greatly, it's probably not a good idea to go and compete, right? As much as you want to do it and you know that you've gotten stronger, it's probably not a good idea to go on the table and go full out when you have some of those injuries. It wasn't a good idea for me to get on the table this last Saturday when I have tears in both of my shoulders. But I'm not as smart as you think I am. I make bad choices like everybody else. But I think Mike could not only could he continue to weight train, but he would just have to do so therapeutically right now. If he wants to keep the intensity at the same level that he's been pulling weekly or bi-weekly or twice a week or whatever, he can, but the time that he spends in the weight room is probably just going to be, more therapeutic. He's going to be doing some holds where he's not creating much shear. He's not using a lot of muscle, loading a lot of muscle that's going to place stress on those already sore tendons.
Right.
Or he could use really light weights. One of the pioneers in this thought, at least in my experience, maybe Michael Todd. He might be able to tell you, well, I learned this from this guy, learned it from this guy. I don't know the history on it, but Michael Todd has long been talking about the blood flow work that he does, right? So he has heavy sessions and light sessions. He has, after every time that he does a lot of very serious table time, he grabs the light weights and he does that. And he even mixes cardio in that too, zone 1, zone 2 cardio, and into circuits. Like, here's a guy who, everybody should be watching, right? You got to be aware of some things. We talked about this too, that, Michael is a unique individual in the sense that, yes, he's done some crazy, he's damaged the shoulders and the elbows and the bicep and, these things. And he's come back. He's come back like nobody else has probably ever come back in the sport, right? Most people would have hung it up a long time ago. And it's like he comes back despite all the criticism and all the people telling him, you won't do this, you won't be able to do that. He comes back with so much zeal and so much, sheer determination that he's gonna get not only to the same level he was before, he's even gonna surpass that.
Right.
And so far he has. He's proven it all the time. He's proven so many people wrong. He's done it because he's had a very methodical approach to his training. He's a very smart guy, and he puts these things into work, and he shows us, right? He shows us what he's doing very regularly. He's like, he realized the importance of training his whole body after talking to, I believe, I'm speculating, but I believe that it was after being influenced from Brandon Allen that he been telling him, like, you should be deadlifting, you should be squatting, you should be doing the big compound movements in addition to your arm wrestling. And in my opinion, that's absolutely true. Every arm wrestler should be squatting. Everybody, if you can, if you don't have injuries that keep you from doing it, you should at least be training your legs. You should be at least training your back, especially your back, and doing the things that are going to allow you to be able to get progressive overload into your training objectively, right? Not just the subjective training, but the objective, be able to measure and see those metrics. When you look at Michael and his training, he's fully immersed in that, and he's well-rounded as an athlete. He has the conditioning. My experience with going out to Michael's place and not having been doing much conditioning at the time was very humbling. I went through his circuit. I knew I hadn't really done much in the way of conditioning lately, but I was like, I'll be fine. I've done circuits before. And it was like, holy crap! I felt it. I didn't even make it through all the rounds. I think I maybe made it 2.5 rounds or whatever. It was like a 5-round workout, and the weights were heavy, right? They weren't. It was just the post-activation potentiation work, the plyometrics, the light conditioning stuff, the speed stuff, all these different principles combined together in a circuit. And, Mike knows what he's doing, right? But to add to that, you need to also understand that Mike is different, right? Mike is not like all these people. So when he does some of these things and his hand is way outside his shoulder and he's doing all this stuff, like, don't expect that you're going to be able to do those things, right? Because he doesn't have to worry so much about damaging those areas because he has calcified and solidified connective tissue growth in those areas that it's very, very unlikely that he's going to be entering those areas anytime soon. And he knows just how to stay south of those injuries because he's that smart, that deliberate in his training. So watch him, but don't necessarily do everything that he does, but be inspired by it and certainly ask questions because he's really good at answering questions too on his YouTube and whatnot. I don't know if he has like a Patreon or anything like that too. He certainly should if he doesn't have one, because that would be a way for him to not only answer those questions, but support the community and have the community as a large community of the people that are interested in doing the sport, not necessarily that have gotten to the point where they're doing the sport, but they could be supporting him as well too.
For sure. Absolutely. We've got a couple chats here. The Drew says, I studied and watched a bunch of arm wrestling videos, followed the sport and people for a few years before ever putting my elbow on the actual table. Knew already what to basically do and not do, etc. No ego. Okay. So yeah, that's cool to hear. There's just so much more information out there than there used to be accessible to us before getting into sport. I think when I first came in, there was a few schoolboy videos out. I think that was the first thing I saw that was interesting, and it definitely catered to that whole the way they made the videos of him back then. He looked real small and he'd go against all these big people and stuff, and then beat them, like the Times Square videos. I think I found that fascinating. That was motivating. Arm Wrestling Showcase has a question for Dave. Arm wrestling for 3 years. I have golfer's elbow on left arm and ulnar pain, and we know that one, on right elbow. How do you heal it? How to prevent it from happening in the first place as well? So how would you heal that, and how would you prevent it?
Well, prevention is rather difficult. The healing process is primarily doing a lot of the same things that you did in order to injure it. You have to put in the reps. You have to do it, unfortunately, but you have to do it with considerably low amounts of weight, and you have to, if movement is causing the pain, you need to either restrict your movement to the range of motion that doesn't cause pain, and you have to restrict the load to the point where you're not in pain. So it's not that you need to push through the pain. You need to push through the movement as much as you possibly can, but you need to be south of the pain. We don't want you to be in pain. So make it slow, make it controlled, and make it light. And make notes, make your own notes. There's no specific way that you have to write it down for anyone else to understand, just so you can understand. But what you're trying to do is you're trying, like, if it hurts when I go like this, if it hurts, right? If I'm moving this way, it's like, okay, well, can I lighten the weight, and can I do a controlled negative? Yeah, well, that doesn't hurt. Can I do it all the way out? Yeah, okay. Oh, when I get out here, it hurts a little bit. Well, maybe I can work this range of motion with a lighter weight, right? And I can do something in there nice and slow and controlled, and that doesn't hurt. Okay, great. So you'll do the reps and do the things that are not going to hurt, and then you keep track of what it is that you're doing. Keep track of the range of motion. Shoot video if you have to, so that you remember what range of motion you're at. How you log and how you document these things is important, because you're going to be able to look back on this and determine, just how much you've progressed. Because if you watch the videos of yourself and you're like, I'm only curling this much now, and then 2 weeks, 3 weeks later, I'm curling this much, right? Then you know that you're progressing, right? And that should give you the confidence to be patient. Just put another article up on my website about patience. It's a very important attribute to be a great athlete in anything, is knowing not just that, how to push yourself, but how to hold yourself back. My coach, Andy Bolton, who coached me for deadlift a couple of years ago, he said that. Those are his words. He said, so many good athletes don't become great athletes because they don't know how to let somebody coach them to pull them back, to hold them back. And that's true. We need patience. That's one of the missing elements in a lot of people from progressing to that point. And, injuries, unfortunately, are going to happen in every sport. What we need to understand is that we need to move through those injuries. We need to pivot. I've got those injuries. I got injuries right now. I tore my tricep off almost 3 years ago, and I'm still working back from that. Prior to that, I had some other injuries. It was, I had an injury in my my shoulder here, and that never healed 100%, and it's resulted in even more injuries in the shoulder as I've come back. But all things that I'm trying to do now to heal still require me to use it. I still have to bench press, right? I still have to reduce the range of motion. I have to go really slow. I still have to overhead press. I'm not going to be pressing 300 pounds anytime soon, because I need to be able to put in the reps with the lighter weight and allow myself to heal. That blood flow work that Michael talks about, what essentially that means is that movement heals, right? If you want to heal an area, you have to get blood to that area, because blood carries nutrients. Blood carries the growth factors that you need in order to heal, and your body's producing these naturally. Now you can augment that with other processes out there like peptides and platelets and stem cells and whatnot. Which most of these athletes, you'll find that they're having a great deal of success with those things, but they're not doing those independent of the training itself. You still have to move, and you go see your doctor and you say, oh, my shoulder hurts or whatever. Your doctor's going to x-ray it, maybe he's going to do an exam, he's going to tell you stop doing what you were doing and let it heal. If he sends you to physical therapy, they're going to tell you something different. Physical therapy is usually going to say, no, you do need to move it, right? And there's a very interesting thing where this is where writing comes in hand, because I could look what it's called. I can't remember it in my head right now. But this degree in which you move, say I have a injury in my shoulder, and I go up here and all of a sudden it hurts right here. Okay. Well, what I can do is I can now check to see, if it hurts here, can I get some assistance and move past it, right, to a fuller range of motion? And does it hurt here? Well, no, it doesn't hurt here. It only hurts when I get to, ow, it hurts right there. Okay, so I can train to that point, right before it hurts, and load that, and I can train there. And then I can get some assistance to come past that. Can someone hand me a weight? Or I can use a band tension or something like that only starts the tension at this point, and then I can get in this range of motion and I can strengthen that. Go up here. Well, there's a very interesting thing. I'm strengthening above and below where that pain is. I'm also strengthening where that pain is, right? Like that, they've proven that over and over and over again. There's about a 15-degree in which the benefits can overlap, right? It's amazing. When you know these things and you can apply these things, you can start to heal. The body can heal itself, but it's going to heal through movement, right? I've known this for years, the benefit of walking, and because I have a condition called exertional compartment syndrome, and I was told I should never run, that I shouldn't stand for long periods of time, all this stuff, and one day I just decided, I was like, what if that's not, because it just seems to get worse and I'm not doing these things. What if the answer is that I need to walk, right? Like, not that I need to run necessarily, because the human body isn't really designed optimally to run. It's designed very optimally to walk, both in how our body metabolizes and works through those different energy systems, and also just in our biphasic movement. So walking is essentially something that we are well designed to be able to do. And we're not designed to sit. So if we try to spend less time sitting and more time doing the things that we're designed to do, what could we potentially feel, right? Well, just getting out there and walking, I noticed emotionally I felt better. My brain fog reduced. I noticed that my lower back was feeling a lot better. Now, as a result of carrying a lot of extra weight, I also started experiencing some stiffness and soreness in my knees and my ankles and my feet, and that was something that I started to overcome. I also felt the exertional compartment syndrome, and you can look this up. There's articles about it on my website as well. But the swelling and the pain that I felt in my legs, I would stop. When I started to feel that pain, I would stop and I would rest so the swelling would go away, and then I would resume walking, and to a point, and then I would decide that was as far as I'm going to go that day. And the next day I would see how much further I could walk without pain. And you know what happened? Eventually I was walking further and further and further with less pain, right? And so it's only when I speed up or try to run that I experience some of those pains. And I suspect that in time, if I continue to do this, I'll even be able to run some, right? Now, this all developed, without giving you a lot of history on that, this all developed during some very extraneous and very intense training that I was doing in my early 20s. And the answer to the military was like, yeah, we're done with you. You can't move on. You can't do these things that you want to do. And we don't want you, basically, right? So that I took that as a sign that I could move on and focus on other things in my life. And not that I regret it, but at 50, I'm still learning, and I'm emphasizing the importance on pivoting and emphasizing the importance on continuing to move for myself. And I'll do the same thing when I'm talking to anyone else about those injuries, is that try to do as much movement as you can and out of pain, right? Like go south of the pain and chart and during those things, and get back to me. Let me know if my advice had any impact and any effect on helping you to get back on the table. And certainly manage your expectations, because it's going to take some time. It's been a humbling thing for me to have to spend so much time coming back to training to come back. I was able to work my bench up to about 330 again, and the problem was not the elbow. Now they reconstructed and rebuilt the elbow. The tricep strength was coming up, and I was progressing appropriately, and it was getting stronger. But then I started having more problems with the shoulder again, and I started feeling even more shear, and the instability in the shoulder resulted in more injuries. I failed 5 out of 5 exams in the shoulder. Basically means there's a lot of stuff going on with the shoulder. 3 out of 5 on this shoulder. Basically it's like you shouldn't be arm wrestling, you shouldn't be doing that. But again, I'm like, if I can arm wrestle a little bit with low intensity and not get in bad positions, I'm going to do it. I'm not going to say no to nothing, to everything. Initially, I was told, like, don't deadlift, don't squat, to parallel, don't do this, don't do that, and don't use a squat bar. I'm still doing all these things I was told not to do, but I'm trying to do them at much considerably lighter loads. Objectively speaking, subjectively speaking, even as well, they're lighter to me. They may not seem light to most people, but they're quite a bit lighter for me. And I fully intend to get back to lifting crazy amounts of weight. Like, if I think they're crazy, I'm sure you'll think they're crazy too. But don't be discouraged. Just keep going.
Yeah, man. I
hope my long-winded answers are okay.
No, man, this is good. It's really good stuff. What's weird for me the last couple years I've noticed is that, like, a lot of the pains that I have from arm wrestling are felt not arm wrestling. So being a tradesman, I'm always beating myself up, right? And it's those things. Oh man, I can't even lift this impact. I can't, or this little motion, this hurts and stuff. And then the initial thought in the movement for me is like, oh, maybe I shouldn't arm wrestle. And but when I do, like, I don't feel the pain. Sometimes it even recovers me quicker. But it's most of the time it's in other things. Wasn't always the case. I remember those first couple years when you can't even put your t-shirt on or steer and stuff like that. But Arm Wrestling Showcase says that they really appreciated your advice. Makes sense. They say I didn't do any arm wrestling practices on left arm, and it didn't heal it. Makes sense to still pull lightly. Now, can you remind me the difference between golfers and tennis elbow? Which one's on the inside?
Well, as an arm wrestler, you're gonna have every one of those things. So, like, basically, like I tell you, the test that you need to look at for what he's talking about, was it golfer's elbow or tennis elbow?
He said golfers, yeah.
Golfers is going to be right here, more on the inside. Think about your club swing, like that downward movement right there, and cause the pain here on the inside. And then the tennis elbow is right here on the top. So if you want to know if you have that, just pull your hand up like this, and then push down. You can do it on yourself. Just like try to hold this hand up and push down. That hurts right there, right? Then that's tennis elbow.
Okay. Yeah, and it seems like the golfer's one is the most typical for newer arm wrestlers, and
you're gonna have all of them. You're gonna have all of them. You
yeah,
got Tommy John. You're gonna have, you're gonna be like, if you were a pitcher, you got this pain, and
right.
the pronator. People got to understand too is the pronator is not just in the wrist, right? The pronation is there's muscles that are involved in pronation all the way up to the shoulder, even the back, the elevation and depression of the shoulder is going to help you with pronation, right? So there's a lot going on there, and forces transfer into other areas, into weaker areas where they're going to cause more damage too. It's going through a chain, right? We call it the kinetic chain, and it starts. If you want to be strong, you got to start from the ground up. Your foot position, where your hip is in relation to the table, all of these things, getting your shoulder forward, and not too far up. If you're too far up and you're rising and you bring your shoulder up, that's going to make you more vulnerable on the inside of your shoulder. If you have a strain, maybe you get a strain in your pec or your pec minor, and you get spread out that way, and you just consistently keep going out there because all the shear that you're getting in your shoulder by coming up here. That's why some guys, like, they end up out of necessity, they end up dropping their shoulder and dropping back and finding that they're really strong here again, and they develop that because there's no, they need to let this heal, until they get here and they get strong in this position. It's not necessarily that one is more superior than the other. You're better in the position that you're strongest, right? But you're also better in the position that causes the least damage, because you're gonna be experiencing those hits, one hit after another after another after another. And so you have to think there's a chessboard going on here too, right? It's not just it's not reps and sets, right? There's a lot of thinking involved. Not that the gym time isn't thinking, but you have to really, really think things out on the table as well. And it's programming on the table, programming off the table, injury prevention. All of those things are things that we're going to talk about. I'm happy to come on here and talk about those things, and I'm happy to write about them. I know I'm going to write about them. I have a list. I have a really long list of topics that I'm going to be writing about in all strength sports. And there's just so many hours in the day. But if people will do me a favor, that when we come on and we do this, if they ask questions, right, and they get involved, I mean, I like to feel useful, right? I like to feel useful. Every day I get up, I want to feel useful, right? And I want to enjoy. I love my gym. I love hanging out here, connecting with people. But ultimately, I want to feel useful. So you have to ask these questions and draw out this experience and motivate me to provide you the information. In part, that is going to be one. I know that you have questions and you need answers for those questions, but also that you're gonna apply some of this, right? Mm-hmm. If nothing else, maybe it inspires you to do your own research, right? But the fact that you want to know and then you come to me, and it gives me a sense of feeling that I'm a part of your journey, and that I'm helping you, and I want to feel useful, and I want to help you. That's the intrinsic nature of who I am, more so than like, you're not paying me to do this, and I'm certainly not asking you to do that either. Now, if you wanted to take up my time, a specific amount of time, and block out time, that does cost something, because I'm in the profession of also providing advice. But when I take the time to get on platforms like this or write articles, and I say in the article, you have a question or you need something, contact me. There's an Ask Dave section on my website that I'd love it if I had 1,000+ responses on there. I'm more than happy to answer questions, and if nothing else, to direct people to full-length articles. I have articles on my website that are 5-minute reads, 3-minute reads. I have articles on my website that are probably going to take you close to an hour to read through. If for no other reason, you might have to read through them a couple times, because even I do. Even I have to, like in creating the article, I have articles that take me, no time at all to write, and most of the day to edit, and then some that I'm working on for months. I've got articles, technique articles on squat, bench, and deadlift that I've yet to push out because I'm not terribly happy with them yet, because I haven't been able to settle on how I want to communicate that information in the writing, right? Because it's so many nuances. It just splits off, and it needs a lot of visual context as well. So it's probably going to result in me taking a lot of photos and drawing lines, things that I don't know how to do, or maybe someone can help me figure that out and be a part of that process. I do need help. If anybody wants to help with shooting videos and drawing some of this information out that I have for any strength sport, by all means, I'm willing to take that help.
Well, we're very fortunate for the information you're willing to impart. And I mean, yeah, you definitely got me thinking. We're obviously going to do this a lot more. But just on recovery and healing for new arm wrestlers, man, we could have a bunch of new arm wrestlers on here and do a pretty educational show that you can lead.
Sure.
I mean, and it goes on even in healing and recovery, because that's going to look it's going to look very different for your more accomplished arm wrestlers. For example, I was the same as a lot of other people starting in the sport. I had a lot. They're usually typical pains. You're feeling special brachialis pains for the first time. You're feeling that inner elbow from having to go sideways and internal rotation, and these little things that are slowly getting conditioned that are so new. I don't have those anymore. I don't like, I'm sure there will be a point where maybe it, you know,
It could resurface.
but
It could resurface, yeah, under conditions in which there's higher levels of force,
right.
or you find yourself more prone to get into certain positions that with some people you're pulling as opposed to others, it could be exposed as well too. It's just one of those nuances of the sport, you know, like even when I'm doing what I was saying earlier about the technique stuff is that like there's a specific way that we might want a squat to look. There's a specific way we might want the bench to look. And that's
right.
primarily related to the bar path and how it relates to applying as much force as possible on the bar, right? So when there's deviation in the bar path, this just simply means that force is moving somewhere out away from the bar, right?
Right.
So there's a lot of reasons why that might happen. It could be weakness in an area. It could be tightness. It could be they're not aware. It could be that they're not, providing enough support to the position of the bar is maybe wrong. So they're leaking out, force that could be there because their wrist is too mobile during the movement because of where the bar is at. It could be that they're flaring too early with their elbows. I mean, it could be all kinds of different things. And so that's why I say it's difficult to do that in even in a video, but it's without it being like really exhaustive. When you're dealing with an individual, I love doing one-on-one technique work with people because I can make some pretty simple corrections and see their technique improve because they're very motivated, right? If they're not, then they're not asking for help. So they're very motivated. They're very willing to execute, and it's probably things that they've already considered as well too. And when that happens, and you see that, it's great, and they'll start to improve their technique and their form, and they'll get stronger. But at some point, they may experience another issue, right? Because as they start to load, now maybe whereas before that they were breaking form for whatever reason, now it's something else that's doing it because of where the bar is placed. So those corrections are ongoing, and even when someone maybe is doing too much of a particular lift, like the West Side Barbell method, which is the conjugate method. Louis Simmons emphasizes the rotation of the bars for a couple primary reasons. One is to stay off of what scientifically is referred to as staleness, right? And so that your body doesn't, this isn't like the P90X thing where we're trying to shock the muscles or anything like that. This is that, your body will provide less adaptation to something that you're continually doing over time, or the adaptation has become so efficient that you're not experiencing enough new stimulus. But by rotating the bars, slightly changing the positions and where the load is, still you're having to create the proper alignment with that bar, right? Whatever that new position is. So those different muscles are engaging and strengthening. Maybe this one tries to force you forward more, so you have to brace harder. Maybe the other one's pulling you back, and so you have to shift your knees have to open up more so that you get more of that vastus lateralis, or you're in a something that throws you forward more, and maybe it's low enough that it's very quad focused, and so you're trying to keep from pitching forward into your toes. Regardless, you're always focusing on that same thing, which is a good bar path and an excellent course through that path. And so that in itself helps to stay off the staleness. And then the adaptation part of it continues over and over and over again with this new stimulus that you're able to continually provide that adaptation, even when the weight isn't significantly going up, right? We become, in that system, you become less focused on reaching, this many reps and this much workload at, 80% or 90%, but rather you work up to more of a subjective training max, where you feel you're roughly at about your 90 or 95%, and then you have lower weights that you do a lot more of that, speed work on, and more of the explosive movements. And not to say that I favor that particular training over other training. There's so many different ways to train, but it's certainly there's a lot of success in that training style when done properly. And I have one of the best coaches for that, in my gym, AJ Roberts. He's a accomplished world champion in powerlifting, and now is coaching people, a small amount of people, crew coaching, the way that it was up to him from Louis Simmons. He does that on our gym, and it's been inspiring to watch and see the implementation of the West Side Barbell method in practice, because I've read about it and I practice certain aspects of it, but not to the extent that, he and I are going to squat tomorrow. I love training with him, and I love getting information from him, and I can tell that he loves hearing from me as well. And but I think that people taking their approach to arm wrestling in a similar fashion, where it doesn't have to be that they need to be strong at one particular thing, but look at all of those testable implements. Look at all the things that to test, like your pronation. Look at those things that test the rolling. But look at it as like a 1-inch handle, 2-inch handles, 3-inch handles. But more importantly, examine where the force needs to be applied to make you better at the sport, not just that you can load it up with more weight. Right? It doesn't. If you're cheating the lift, if the strap is always in the position where it's the easiest for you in the weakest part of your hand, and you're just trying to challenge your arm. Well, how is that going to translate to the sport if somebody is pulling out against that weaker part of you? You have to strengthen that too. You need to have a metric for even that same implement, that same strap. You have to have several different ways in which you measure. I have a strap over this area, strap over this area, over this area. Am I using the thumb? Am I not using the thumb? Is it going through my hand? I'm squeezing on it, and it's coming on the outside. I'm squeezing on it, it's coming here. You have to test all of those things, and even then, now add the angles, right? How is this angle relative to the position of my hand? And imagine where you are in the fight when you're in that position. If you're out here and you're trying to to rise, what does that look like? Supposed to be here and be dead center of the table. How often are you dead center of the table when you're trying to rise? Pretty much for only a short period of time. You're either over here and you're doing something, or you're back over here and you're fighting for position. So those are all things to consider. But and when we relate those back into the training, we have to get as objective as we possibly can, but we have to look at all the nuances and how they string together. And that's something that, like, I hope everyone's going to take a really active role in that and study all these things themselves. Not just, I'm not expecting people to just read, what I put out. But I hope that you will read what I put out, and I hope you'll challenge me to, provide you more of the specific stuff that you're interested in. And it also will inspire other people to write or create videos or to do shows like this where they can discuss those things, and we can get people who are interested into making a decision to get to a tournament, get to a practice for sure, get to a tournament as a spectator, to get to a tournament as a participant, that I can also inspire more promoters or even just captains of clubs to put on showdowns, right? Call them whatever you want. If you got a better name for it, that's fine. I just like the name Showdown sounded good. It went well with San Diego. Feel free to call it whatever you want. But the idea is that that we're creating some sort of funnel, right, to bring people in, to get people off the couch, to get people, into the tournament idea, into the competition mindset, and to create the champion mindset. And the only way to do that, I'll reemphasize, the only way to create that championship mindset is that you have to be willing to be vulnerable. You have to be willing to fail. You have to be willing to suck in order to get good, right? You can't be great at something unless you're really terrible at it first. And I've been really terrible at a lot of things in order to be able to get even a little bit good at it. Oh man, you hear me, but I can't hear you.
Oh, my bad. I muted myself because I muted
Okay.
myself. Yeah, my baby, causing a ruckus over there.
Yeah.
Well, we've got people from different states, just in the chat alone, watching this. I did post the article link in the chat for people to check out, and I'll make sure to edit it in the description section later. Yeah, Arm Wrestling Showcase says, I appreciate the, wait, here we go. Looking forward to reading your article on tendons. I will share the article with the Arizona arm wrestling groups. So
Perfect. Thank you.
good work's being done here. And there's something you said way earlier in our talk about the eccentrics and out here, that was really really interesting and kind of solidifying for me. So along with the a lot of table time that I've been implementing a lot on with weight training and all that. We've got a visitor from Canada on our team named Taylor Mason, real strong 205 guy, very smart. And at one of our mountain practices, he had us all do something that was really interesting he was like, okay, are you guys like done? Are you done arm wrestling? You're not going to arm wrestle anymore. We're like, okay, yeah, we'll call it a night now. And he actually put us through an eccentric, it wasn't with weights, it was with a partner, through an eccentric process, both for straight bicep and then, neutral. And we did reps of that. And man, like that was amazing. Like my recovery felt even better. So let me put it this way. When we did that, I was probably on my like second or third practice for the week. And when I showed up to that practice, I'll be honest, I was a little sore. I was a little bit sore. When I left that practice after doing those purposeful eccentric exercises at a certain percentage of, effort, it wasn't full effort. I left that practice feeling better than I came to the practice. What?
Well, arguably what's going on there too is that there's a little proprioceptive neurovascular facilitation in that. So That's a little fancy where you just call PNF, proprioceptive neurovascular facilitation. And so that guided stretch that he's doing there,
Yeah.
you can also do it's called a resist relax technique that is part of that too, where it's like you'll do it and you'll hold a little bit and then you'll let go and then you'll open up a little bit more and let go. Right. And it can even go to the extent where you're really, really lengthened out. I don't always recommend that per se on the bicep. More of a very active rather than passive stretching process is definitely better, and it will lengthen out a lot of and that's, there's guys that you can't lengthen the fibers or whatever. Like thing there, I think it's arguably something is happening there where the spindle fibers are definitely opening to a longer position, a less resistive position there, if we can use that as a nomenclature and then say that's what's happening. But the argument is going to be that when I was referencing to something where like, hey, you can't really lengthen out the muscle fibers. And it's like, well, they elongate, right? So if what our objective is to leave the practice with our muscles feeling more like opened, right? That would be the process. That would be what you would do. And it's safer to do that at the end of the training as opposed to the beginning of the training. If we do like any PNF work at the beginning, we're sort of shutting off a natural defense mechanism that is going to shut down our muscle when the strain is so high, so intense that it would otherwise cause pretty severe damage to the muscle. So it's definitely best at the end. Dynamic movement with minimal amounts of actual stretching is best for the beginning of the workout. So just reps, right? With very, very, like, you can start your reps even too if you really want to be safe in arm wrestling. Start really tight like this, and then just do really light reps this way, right? Get that blood flow in there and get the pump going, and then opening up a little bit more, keeping it light still, and coming out, starting with this tempo, and then you can get into going faster, right? And that dynamic movement is what's going to allow you to be able to be ready for the sport. And then you have to articulate all the joints. You have to get going with all the shoulder stuff too, right? Move through the different planes of movement, right? Get the shoulders going, the wrist going, right? Articulate the fingers. There's different things that you can use to, squeeze, and then you can do the extension stuff. All this stuff is good blood flow work post as well. But the stretches that he had you do sound very much like what he was doing was PNF, proprioceptive neurovascular facilitation, and it's really good post workout. It's going to help with the recovery. Certainly going to help you leave feeling a lot more open and less bound up.
Yep. Yeah.
Just don't go pulling right after you do that.
Yeah. So. Yeah. That's what he was saying. He's like, don't pull anymore. But yeah, like even back to what we were saying before, how this pain was a lot more common for me when I was more brand new. But where now those feel more conditioned, like I can take more load there. The typical pain I get is more here, just going into the bicep connections and stuff.
Well, that's along the brachialis into the brachioradialis, and so.
So why is it not here anymore? It's mostly in.
It's just a different. The force is being applied differently. The fact that it's on the brachioradialis now means that you're probably pulling better, right? If it's on the outside here, one that tissue has gotten stronger, that it's probably not experiencing as much inflammation, but mostly not just because of the training, but because of how you're moving better on the table, right? Because this pain that you feel out here, this buildup over here, and most arm wrestlers will can just touch right here if they're early in the sport. They can touch and be like, "Fuck, this hurts. It's really sore." And it's still, even as an experienced puller, if you're pulling a lot, it still might be sore. but this is where there's a lot of shear on the bone there, right?
The
So
humerus, yeah,
the
yeah,
bone is it's torque, and it's spiral, right? So it's like even when you're in a good position, even when you're inside here like that, and you get forced out here like that, there's still a lot of shear that's going to occur on this area, right?
right.
I mean, you could break an arm if you're not a very strong person. You can break an arm even in a good position, right? But uh, some of the some of us, have the mindset that you're kind of conditioning the bone by breaking it a little bit at a time when you're arm
Yeah,
wrestling, right? So,
yeah,
not doing a lot of table time within the first year is probably a good idea. I mean, consistent table time, but like you probably only need to do once a week, and certainly not really hard pulling, and definitely not in bad positions. So
right, right, right.
Alan was always a big advocate of pulling safety and not using torque, but using muscle. And
Yeah,
that's because he had a great deal of concern for the safety that people were in, and also he wanted them to come back and pull again because he needed hands, especially new, fresh hands, and people who could come back and pull 3-4 times a week with him because that's how he predominantly trained. And so
right.
he was not going to beat you up. He was not going to let you do something that you shouldn't be doing. Now, as you became more experienced and when you get better as an arm wrestler, he might treat you a little different. He might really beat you up a little bit more. But he still wanted you to pull safe, right? He hated when I got into bad positions and used torque. But I also did it because I was naive enough to think that I could pull in those positions and cause minimal damage. I think I did cause a lot of damage to my shoulder, and I had a lot of pain in that area that you were speaking of.
Yeah. I remember I must have been like 8 months in or a year in, and Ray Cody was at one of our practices, and I didn't
Great
really
coach.
know him. Yeah, Ray Cody. Yeah, I didn't really
I
Mr.
love
Country
that guy.
Crush.
He's such a good guy. I haven't seen enough of Ray lately.
Yeah, he's great. I love him. And anytime he pops up, I love talking to him. But yeah, I didn't really know him. It was like my day one meeting him, and we pulled a little bit. I'm hearing all these cool stories of his travels, arm wrestling, and everything. And I asked him the funny question that a lot of new people ask. I was like, Ray, I think my arm might be a little bit broken. I have this I have this pain right here. Like, yeah, I can, just like you said, like I can touch it and it feels like could I have a hairline fracture? Like should I pull or should I not pull right now? And he chuckled to himself a little bit and he said, "Welcome to arm wrestling." It was a hard little slap, but um yeah, I don't know. It was just very humbling. It was hard to hear, and I laughed a little bit. But I look back at it now, in one respect, I'm like, well, yeah, you could break your arm pretty easily, and I was probably feeling that because, like you said, the torque on the humerus and all that stuff. But at the same time, I look back at it now, and I'm like, yeah, it kind of it riding that line took me to the conditioning to where I don't feel that anymore. And it's a great moment. One of my favorite moments in arm wrestling was feeling my frame, getting to a point where the tendons and bones felt just conditioned enough to where in a controlled setting in practice I could say, oh, there's my frame. Whereas before it was kind of like this unknown, dangerous kind of territory or something like that. And then getting to a point where you're like, oh, okay, this like I actually feel some awareness, a little fortification here, and where how much can rest on that. And I can see how that bar can constantly go up. Like there's still plenty of people I can break my arm on, but it was just that initial conditioning phase of like, oh, okay, all right. It was a great feeling because it felt like something that you could stack on top of. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean, when you finally get into that position, you know, it where you feel comfortable and you feel like you've got the connection, right? Like Sarah talks about the connection, everything feels connected. And essentially what that means is like, you know, you feel as if you're stacking everything, right? Like if we were doing an Olympic lift, or we're doing, you know, any kind of like movement where we're standing and we're curling or pressing overhead, we're trying to get the bones to articulate that force and move through whatever those leverages are to provide as little muscle in that movement as possible. So like even with like the strict curl, people go like, oh, a strict curl, a lot of bicep. And it's like, hopefully not. Hopefully I'm getting into that position enough where I can actually drive the force in as much of an upward direction rather than coming out. Because if I go out, right, then I'm really using a lot of bicep. But if I can bring it up my body and drive it up more like this, right, then the force is more stacked in an even way, and instead of driving the force out away from me. The more when I strip, the more I come out like this, the more likely I'm going to get stuck in one of these positions, especially if my wrists aren't curled in. And when you're in an overhead press movement where you're dipping and driving, right? The last thing you want to do is either be too far forward or too far back. You have to be in right position, and your bar has to be stacked just in the right way so that it's traveling. The force is traveling straight down. So it's like even when you're locked out overhead, right? That force is straight down. You don't want it forward like this, or else you're going to have to use way too much muscle to hold it, right? It doesn't mean that the muscles don't get stronger. You don't believe me? Look at Olympic lifters.
Sure.
They have huge muscles, right? Not as big as a bodybuilder, right? Because that's the type of training that you're very specifically focusing on, that primarily that sarcoplastic hypertrophy. And so there's going to be a lot of repetitions and a lot of muscle specific work that you're doing to get that size. That's not terribly that's not really the focus in arm wrestling. I mean, if we get bigger biceps, great, but you don't need bigger biceps to be great in arm wrestling. But it does help to pull a bigger load by having a bigger trailer, right? If you're going to put a bigger engine, you can only put so much horsepower and so much cubic meters into a vehicle before you actually have to alter the vehicle, make the vehicle bigger, right?
Sure, yeah.
So it's the same. It's the same thing with the human body. But we want to max out what we have, and then we can go from there. We don't just want what I refer to it as dysfunctional hypertrophy. So it's like we want hypertrophy centric training, right? I have the style of my training I call it hypertrophy centric cyclical training. Always a hypertrophy focus in the training, but as much if you're training to be a sports for sports specific reasons, you're training to be a particular athlete. This hypertrophy is specific to the sport and making it more advantageous for you in the sport, not just to be big for big's sake. But that's okay too. I mean, if that's your objective, right? I mean, my objective is definitely to be big for big's sake, because it's like the root of all of my training focus, first and foremost, was to be bigger, was to be possibly a bodybuilder. So
yeah,
that's why, and I believe that the lifeline and to your health is related to principally two very distinct things. Well, three really. But the two things that people aren't thinking enough of is the waistline and the amount of lean muscle mass. And the waistline part of it is something that I've given less consideration for that as in my pursuit for sport, and I'm trying to get back to that. When I was a young man in my late teens, early 20s, I had a very small waist, and I was still very, very strong. And so I arguably feel like I could get back to that smaller waist and still be very strong. So that's my objective for my physique right now. more so than gaining muscle. I have a considerable amount of muscle. My last body fat test showed 226 pounds of fat-free mass, meaning like if there wasn't 1 pound of fat on my body, there'd be 226 pounds of everything else. That's a considerable amount to carry. And so at low body fat percentages, if I can maintain, 10, 15, 20 pounds of body fat, that puts me roughly in the 242 class, which would be much better than to be peaked out in the 242s than be sitting around 275. And certainly felt that getting up to 300 didn't really give me much metric in terms of strength. Maybe a little bit more on bench, but I've benched as much at 225 as I've ever benched at 300. So I think that arguably being lighter is more important. And the third, I don't want to leave this off, but the third is movement. So you have to do movement for restorative therapy, and you have to do movement because it's important to work in all different types of energy systems to challenge yourself. Not just talking about cardio. We'll throw that terrible C word. It's the other C word that nobody wants to talk about. But cardio is important, but you can call it conditioning if that makes it a little easier for you to stomach it. But those are the three things. So building muscle. Muscle is very important for health and longevity, and conditioning or movement, and also getting a smaller waistline. A small waistline is definitely connected to your lifeline. I believe that. I believe that the research supports all of that.
Right. Yeah, I love running. I think running's great. There's one correlation that I've noticed with arm wrestling with running. I mean, there's plenty, I think, but do you ever work with newer arm wrestlers where they almost gas themselves out because they don't know how to breathe when they're arm wrestling? Yeah. You kind of get that like 100% for like 2 seconds, and then they stop and they're out of breath. Like with every surge or 2 second push, they're like, and
it's also, I mean, technique wise, like getting into the technique part of it, or maybe even more of the strategic part of it, is that you don't want your opponent to see you take those breaths either.
Yeah.
Right. So when you're in a position, you're like this, and then you go, it's like that's the time for them to hit. If they're holding, right, and they see you take that breath, you're the most vulnerable at that point, right? Because there's some things going on there at the cellular level that you're not going to be as strong at that moment when you're taking that breath. The body is trying to relax the muscle at that point, especially if you're conditioning in that pattern. If you want to break free from that pattern of conditioning, you'll have to reverse things. You'll have to, we typically will, when we exert something, we're going to typically exhale and we're going to inhale on the relaxation, or we're going to come out into the relax, and then we're going to take a deep breath, and then we're going to come back in. You have to change those breathing patterns if you want to be able to breathe differently and expose your nervous system to different types of stimulus, or overcome some of those things that could potentially be inhibiting your performance. But
sure,
that's maybe a topic for another day, because that's a long time before you have to do that. There's micro expressions that you need to avoid when you're on the table, and this, that, and the other. And
right.
I don't even get into all that, because I'm probably not.
Yeah, I mean, that's
enough.
Yeah, and it's very technical based what you're talking about. But when you run, a new runner will take a breath with every stride. You know what I mean? And that's why they don't have much endurance, because they're taking, versus
also, it's not just the cadence of the breath, but there's the depth of the breath too. So like a really good runner is going to be able to take a certain amount of shallow breath and then a deeper breath, and a certain amount of shallow breath and a deeper breath.
Right.
There's a lot of breathing techniques that some of the more advanced runners talk about.
Right. Mine becomes a little more shallow.
I've never gotten to the point where I really needed to commit a lot of that information, only because I don't deal with people that are at that advanced level.
Right. Well, when I go for a run on the mountain, it's like it's a little more shallow, but that an entire inhale will be over the course of like 3, maybe even 4 strides, you know, and the exhale is also like it's just the body's dynamically moving, you know, quickly and exerting, but you know the breath is relaxed and slowly, like at a shallow level coming
Well,
out.
to explain some of the science of that pattern too, without getting too heady in it, it's just we don't want to just take oxygen in, right?
Right.
We want to get the CO2 out, right? So we want to expel that. So in order to be able to do that, we have to be able to force it out. There needs to be a harder exhale, and it's harder. It's more difficult to have a hard exhale when you have a lot of air to breathe out.
Sure.
So the short breaths, like we're coming in, like you're trying to breathe in, get as much oxygen as you can, but then get that out, right? Yeah. Then that hopefully gets that out, and you can get conditioned to the point where your exhale is not just quick, but it's deep, right?
Right.
So, and you're building. I mean, you're building up, to the point where you're eventually going to need that big breath, like you mentioned. But it's kind of like divers who prepare for a dive. They do the same thing. They have these breaths that they take before, which seems like they're hyperventilating.
Right.
Hyperventilating doesn't work, but it seems like they're hyperventilating. But what they're doing is they're pushing out as much CO2 as possible so that they can bring in mostly oxygen.
Sure. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, at least that's the way I understand it. I could be wrong. I'm not an expert on breath work. I'm not an expert on training advanced runners, but
right.
That is what I'm aware of.
Yeah, man. There's a lot that we have to talk about. I would like to do a show sometime, maybe with some new folks. As discussed before, you know, that those are the ones we want to grow the sport. So it would be good to get a lot of new people on to pick your brain a bit.
Well, I'm down. I'm game to do that, because I feel like, you know, as much as we can, whatever we can do, again, for that funnel, like whatever we can do is get people interested from the lowest barrier possible, right?
Yeah.
And get them in, and they're consuming information. They're thinking about, and then give them that call to action. You know, without the call to action, you know, that's something that, you know, again, going back to my buddy AJ, who's a brilliant marketer. He was reading, you know, some of my articles, and he goes, you should add a call to action to your article. And I was thinking, like, a call to action in my article, like, that's more like a marketing piece. And, you know, like, I'm not, you know, he goes, but aren't you marketing to people? Like, don't you want them to do something with the information that they're giving you? And don't you want to promote yourself as a source for getting more information? Well, yeah. Okay, you're right, buddy. Yeah. And so I started adding that to all the articles, and I'd instinctively done it a little bit, but it made more sense to continue to keep doing that, especially giving me the confidence to do that. And so even that, in a way, was sort of a call to action, right? And my point of that is that when I did my first bodybuilding show, I was 18 years old. I had been training for bodybuilding for the last year and a half, roughly. And I'd been training since, for those that don't know, I started weightlifting when I was 8. I know it sounds crazy, but I started lifting weights when I was 8. Not everything, but just a few exercises. I had a weight set that I got for a present because I begged my mom for it. By the time I was 12, I built my own weight bench, and I started doing more exercises. And for those that, you know, have heard this story, I apologize, because, you know, told it probably a lot, and you too. But that's my origin, right, in terms of weightlifting. And no one was telling me that I needed to do anything, and I made the decision to do it up until a point. And so when I got into, my late teens, I didn't feel that I was ready for the stage. I didn't feel that I was ready to compete in bodybuilding. And yet other people felt that I was, and they put that in my ear and said, you need to compete. And that's what pushed me to do it, right? And so I think that, if you're an arm wrestler and you're going to practice, and people are saying you need to compete, maybe that's what you need to listen to. Maybe that's what you need to do. And that would be my wish for you. And for those of you that are listening and you haven't even been to a practice, then you need to go to practice, or at very least you need to go to a tournament and just watch, be a spectator. Be a consumer of arm wrestling videos, like the gentleman that you were speaking about earlier. He says watched a lot of videos, and then he got into arm wrestling practice, and then into tournaments. I mean, that's an excellent path. We have, since we're so central here in San Diego, we get people that come in from all over the country here, and will come in and train in various different sports. Some of them never having competed before, and I've convinced quite a few to do their first competition. Not necessarily here, but we welcome to come here and do that. A young man who had been a member of my gym, who was exceptionally strong, right? Even working with, I believe at that time he was working with one of the coaches locally, and he hadn't done a competition. I'd asked him if he'd even been to a competition. He hadn't been. I was like, well, why don't you come help out with the competition that we have going? So he came in like spotter and loader, and then a year later he was competing, and I know that had that process was part of what drove him, through that. It's like I said, it's a funnel, right? And this young man is remarkably strong. He could very well be one of history's all-time greatest powerlifters. I mean, it's remarkable what he's doing. He's in 2,000 total now, I believe, and only getting better. So, and that's not from my coaching, but I'm just telling you, like the conversations that we had, and I'm sure he had conversations similar to that with other people, inspiring him to do the very same thing. But that's what we need as the individual hearing these conversations with someone is telling you, someone you have respect for, someone you trust, telling you need to compete, then do it. I got back into the sport of powerlifting after a 23-year absence. In my mind, I was building up this idea that the only way I could compete was that if I were doing the same numbers that I was doing prior to that, and I hadn't hit all those numbers yet. And so, but it took, a friend, coming to me and saying, you need to do this competition that's coming up. And since he said that I should do it, I said, all right, I'll do it. And I loved it, and I had a good time. I won the competition, and I signed up for one 2 months later, and and I was back at it. I still not hit all the numbers. I hit 2 out of the 3 numbers, but I haven't hit all the numbers that I had, my best numbers. But I've now hit my best ever number in bench press in competition, and my best number ever in deadlifting competition. Just haven't hit the squat number yet. And I may not, but I'm competing. Oh, look at the beautiful baby.
Can you say hi?
Yeah, what's up? She's gorgeous. She's so gorgeous.
Yeah, she looks like her mom. So when's your next strict curl competition at Grinder Gym?
The next strict curl competition at Grinder Gym, gosh, I don't have the calendar in front of me. We're working on that right now. I believe, I know when the next power curl is. We're doing power curl the same day we do the patty pull. We'll have curls for golds.
What's the difference? What's a power pull?
Power curl is an explosive curl. So like before, when I was telling you before how you're trying to stack and you're trying to go into a straight movement like that. So a power curl is more like a clean. than coming out. Where a strict curl is going to force you to come out a little bit. It's a little difficult to go in a straight line with a strict curl. Technique helps a lot with a strict curl, so that you can get the wrist and the hand in the right position to drive up. But power curl, you're using your hips, you're exploding. It's more think of it like a clean, but instead of your hands being like this, they're in a curl position. And so it does require a tremendous amount of bicep strength, but the load is only on the biceps for a very short period of time at the bottom and at the top. And then when it's at the top of the movement, you have the great deal of assistance from the pecs and the shoulders to brace and support that load and hold it in that position. And at the bottom, when the bicep is considerably at its weakest position, you have the momentum of the hip drive to be able to overcome the load. So it shouldn't be thought of necessarily as a bicep exercise, right? In the way that if you're a general gym goer and you want to develop your biceps, you don't necessarily do power curls because it's something that's going to transfer over to bicep growth. You do this because it's a competition lift, right? And anytime I post this, I get tons of hate on it, ego lifting, this, that, and the other. And it's what competition isn't partly ego, right? We're creating some sort of metric in which we can sort of, measure ourselves against others. And that's simply what this is. It's a competition lift, and I'm going to perform and train the competition lift so I can compete in it. And I'm pretty good at it. There are people in the world who are better than me. I'm not the best in the world, but I'm by far best or better at it than most, and probably a good amount of people that are certainly my age. I like the lift. I do have some of the same limitations with that lift due to my injuries, both the elbow as well as the shoulder. I have not yet been able to do the 300-pound power curl that I want to be able to do. I'm just short of that. I've been able to do 285 in competition, but I haven't been able to do more than that. I get the weight up. I could probably get up more than 300 up into position, but not with the proper hold at the top before getting the down command. So you can't let the weight collapse on you.
Wow.
What's that?
Say, good Lord, that's a lot of weight. So I want to try one of those competitions sometime. My only hesitation with the strict curl and stuff is it's the single bar. I'd be comfortable with anything that was in a neutral position, like one of those kind of bars.
So a power curl bar is like this, right? So
yeah,
there's a lot. It's more
not just that slight angle, but mostly neutral.
Yeah, it's just like this.
Okay.
It's the only position you really want to be. You could be out here like this. That's another position, but this is the ideal position for the power curl.
I used to lift with a straight bar and be fine, but ever since I've gotten really conditioned for arm wrestling, it just hurts. So I do a lot of single arm curls.
I'd recommend you still lift with a straight bar from time to time, but with much lighter weight. Lighter weight. Think of it as put it maybe towards the end of the workout when you've conditioned things and everything's more open and more pliable, and then put it at the end of the workout and just use it almost therapeutically, and then you can add load to it, and you could move it further up into the workout if you want with more load. You don't have to avoid it, but you do have to give the same consideration as we were talking about before. If there's a reduced range of motion, then you need mobility work. You need to condition and strengthen the muscle in that position. It doesn't mean you have to avoid it. It means that you may not be able to prioritize it for a while, and you may not be able to load it very much for a considerable amount of time, and quite possibly. Only because you're doing other things that are going to repeatedly cause stress that you're you're overcoming and you're adapting to. So it's
Right.
like you're going this way,
Mm-hmm.
and then the bar is trying to bring you out this way and stretch you out more.
Right.
Not necessarily a bad thing. Not necessarily a bad thing, but it could be a bad thing to load it with a lot of what consider on a load. So
yeah, it's the owner side in here.
Yeah.
Usually it's a little uncomfortable for me, but
Yeah.
I like this. Yeah. Okay. So I'll try it. Yeah. I'll try lighter weight.
You don't have to avoid it, but you're probably gonna have to do it much lighter.
Okay.
But for power curl, the bars like this. For strict curl, it's we use the in the International Strict Curl Association (ISCA). We use the bar is it's the Ivanko bar, and it does not have a lot of bend on it. Right, it's not straight, but it does not have a lot of bend on it. So there are other organizations that use a different bar, but ISCA is the strictest strict curl in the world, and the standards are upheld to the same standards in which CT Fletcher set his record, some many years ago when he curled 225, and it's been his opinion that it should stay with that same bar. I tend to agree. I think at the very least having that standard continue on is important. Both the ISCA as well as the U.S. strict curl uses that bar, and then all the other ones use the gopher bar, and the Russians use a bar that's more similar to this. That's why they have, I'm not saying that's exactly why they have like bigger numbers, but it is easier to train with higher loads being in this position as opposed to being stretched out in this position, right?
Yeah.
And there's less advantage to being able to get into that straight up position. You are forced out more with that Ivanko bar, more out here. You can't get straight up into that position, whereas you can when you're here like this. You can not cheat it, but you can get in the most advantageous position to drive up straight line bar.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Fascinating. Yeah. Keep me posted on that. I'd like to try that power curl.
I'm working on getting the schedule finalized. We have it finalized for, like I said, for the arm wrestling. So we're going to be getting that up soon. I'll be leaving town next week, so I'm hopefully can get most of the stuff posted before I leave town, because I'll be out of town for 5 days. I've got some security work that I'm doing out of town, and then I'll be back, and time to host or run the Iron Wars at CT Fletcher's gym. And so
cool.
If you're hearing this and you want to see some really fun lifts, max weight, max reps, we will have a strict curl event there, but it's going to be strict curl for reps. It's our first one to do with the ISCA, so we have special weights for each weight class that we'll be putting out. That has the athletes will be performing as many reps as possible with that weight, and then it'll just be another way to compete on the strict curl.
Okay. All right, man. Yeah, very cool. Yeah, I want to do it. Yeah. Let me know, and safe travels when you go. Also anything that you need for patty pull, let me know. I want to help anything we can to get more people, more new people.
Yeah, we need to get people to come out.
Yeah.
We need to get people to know about it and come out. It's always fun. I mean, we always have a really great time. I know the drive isn't pleasant for some people, and I know it's not the easiest thing to get time off from work. It costs money to take time off of work. It costs money to travel. It costs money to come out and support the competition. We are going to have to charge a spectator fee. That's part of the support. That's part of what allows us to be able to, continually hold these events and hold them in where we can continue to scale what it is that we can offer the athletes and create the best experience by having. We need to make repairs and improvements to all of our strength equipment, as well as the arm wrestling tables, arm wrestling equipment, and that money it has to come from somewhere. You're not getting sponsors, right? Like, I don't know how aware of this that most people are, but like a good majority of sponsors don't put cash into strength sports. It's very rare, and it's only at high levels that they only, and to their, nothing against them, but like if you're a product company of any sort, or even a service that is catered towards strength sports of any type, you probably don't have a lot of extra money to sponsor. There's just not. We're not creating. It's not Nike creating shoes, for the sport that's looking out to sponsor strongman. Like, that's what we need. We need Nike. We need Adidas or Reebok. They have sponsored things like CrossFit, but they're not reaching out to sponsor local arm wrestling events. And we need local restaurants that are trying to advertise or directly going to benefit from those arm wrestlers coming out and maybe after pulling at their location. Like, these are the types of things where you can maybe get a little bit of sponsorship revenue, or if you got someone who's just a super fan and they've got some extra money that they want to throw into prize money, maybe that's an opportunity. But otherwise, it falls on the promoter. And if the promoter doesn't have deep pockets, or in my case, is really trying to juggle a lot of different strength sports to put on, we got to charge. And we're charging as little as we feel that we can in order to be able to hopefully get what is necessary in order to be able to cover all of those costs and eventually raise the prize money. I'm really hoping to be able to put $500 per arm into the overall, and be able to put something into this year's pro open or pro class, whatever you want to call it, put something at least into the first place winners. If nothing else, be able to give them back their entry fee. Kyle and I have been talking about, for some time, we've been talking about a tiered structure for first, second, and third based on how many pullers are entered into that class. That would be the only perceivable way in which to guarantee prize money, is if we can guarantee that there are pullers who have paid to enter that class, and that the money is coming directly from that class. And so that would look something like, I'm sure other promoters have done this as well, but that would look something like if you had, 5 pullers or 8 pullers, you'd have a tier of however many pullers are in that class would determine what the prize money would look like. The promotion still has to make some of that so that it goes to the overall running of the tournament, but
Sure.
at least a percentage of that could be pushed back to the arm wrestlers. And if there's not enough pullers, if there's only 3 pullers in that class, there's not going to be any prize money, because there's just not enough. There may be enough to offer something, but it takes away from the overall pot. It takes away from the money that is already being pulled to give that that pro who's going to win out of the overall, going to give them the chance. And I want to actually reduce the likelihood that in that what we consider a higher level prize money, we will reduce the likelihood that someone's going to come in and just try to dominate 3 or 4 weight classes and are sure that they're not going to be challenged in the overall. Like, that's still fun. That's still fun to watch that. One of the things that I will say about Brendan Allen's tournament idea when he was putting on tournaments, he did not like the idea that someone could pull multiple weight classes. And he didn't allow them to do that. So you couldn't, you weighed in and you were in that weight, that was your weight class, and you wouldn't pull outside of that weight class. That makes the most sense, and it certainly makes it more competitive. And then it's like, if you're dominating your class, great, just save it for the overall and then put more money into the overall to show that you're really truly that competitive. But seeing you just pull all day and pull all these different classes, I mean, it's great from a training perspective, but from a spectator's perspective, it's not that fun. They're not really enjoying, seeing someone just clean up and dominate on the table. And for those athletes that are trying to get better and strategize, their placement in the sport, having somebody who's so many levels above them come into their class, when they're just reaching into the open division and getting spanked by someone who probably should only be pulling in super matches and upper level stuff for that kind of money. It's no fun either.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Makes sense. Absolutely.
And that's something we should probably come back another time. We can talk more about that. The logistics side of things, like setting a standard amongst pullers, a sort of code of ethics that doesn't necessarily need to be written down, but like it should be understood. I mean, if you, for example, like there's no guidelines about pulling in an amateur class. I mean, I could go to Florida next weekend and pull in an amateur class and possibly beat everybody in that class. Should I do it? I mean, ethically speaking, probably not. It's certainly not going to do a lot of good for the sport. And so, it's really just about chasing trophies. And as you can see, I got plenty of those. I don't need to chase them. If you get them, great. And people like to see them. It kind of says that you've played around, you've done something. But if you really want to level up in the sport, you want to get better, and you're seeking personal development, you're not going after the easy wins anyway. You're going out there to challenge yourself.
Yeah.
But you want it to be a fair ground. And I get that some people are doing the multiple divisions and stuff for training purposes. It's a way to test them out further, but it also looks like a money grab as well. And it's just overall, it just doesn't have the best optics.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense. I really like the idea of pooling between the classes for their own types of payouts and stuff. That's really cool too. It could help build those classes bigger. And it
gives people a chance to move up too. Like, I mean, if you did, we call it combining a class rather than in strength sports rather than and most strength sports, like you don't do it in powerlifting, but you do it in strongman to create a higher level of competition, and to have somebody to compete against. Like, it's not fun to go to a strongman competition and compete against only one guy. Two guys, maybe it's fine. I've done that. That's fun. But, I'd much rather, if I were in a lower weight class, I'm always at the top of the weight class, but if I were in a lower weight class, I wouldn't mind, going up to a higher weight class so that I have more competition rather than only competing against one or two people. I didn't do all this training and to drive to the location, doing all that so I didn't have anybody to compete with.
That's the thing. Yeah.
And I'm not there. I'm not concerned. I'm not looking at the board to see who my competition is or watching their videos online to, see. I mean, I might look at some of that just because I'm just interested in like knowing who the person is, but not because I'm like, ooh, I don't know if I'm going to go to a competition because they might beat me, right? I want to be challenged. I want to be pushed. So my last, I think it was this year or last year when I went to Bull the Desert, and I didn't win. I think I took second in two of the events. It was the first time that's ever happened to me in strongman, where I've had where I've like won all the events and maybe tied one, or won all the events and took third in one, but I've never had it to where I had a second place in two events and tied another. So I wasn't upset about it. I was just like, oh wow. I mean, I don't know if I'm going to win. I think actually I might have taken a third in one of the events, but I still won the competition overall. But it was an eye opener where it's just like, okay, because I didn't train all of the events. I was still coming back from the tricep tear, and even like the press, I had to, when I did the Viking press, it was like I think like 200. It was like 275-pound Viking press or 300 pounds, and I don't remember the weight, but I remember I did like 18 reps with it, and I tied with someone else, and it was challenging for me because like I still couldn't drive off the left arm too much, so it was a lot of right arm, and so I was actually pleasantly surprised that I did well on that because I had practiced on my implement here with the competition weight, or maybe that's why I'm getting confused. I think I was practicing with 300, and I think the competition weight was 275, but I didn't get more than like 3 or 4 reps prior to the competition, and when I went there, I was able to do 18. So I was really surprised with that. I wasn't expecting to do well on that one.
Yeah.
I was expecting to do better with the vehicle pull, but there were some problems. No one did great with the vehicle pull. But anyway, to digress, and my point is that I enjoyed that competition more than the prior competitions because of the challenge, because of the nuances in that, because of the fight and the uncertainty, and because I almost lost, you know, and I think that made me even like more pleased with the outcome, or more pleased with the award, that it meant more to me. And so, you know, no one wants to just be first place because there's no one to compete with, which has happened to me in powerlifting before. And you know, you just at that point when that happens, you just make the competition something else. You make it more about your PRs, your personal records, and your personal best, or you make it about you know, looking at the other competitors that are competing that day, and could you have beat the people that are in the other classes if they were a competitor or whatever. And we talked about this the other day, where it's like, for me, like the competition part of it is only really a small part, right? Like I do fancy myself somewhat as a competitor, but I'm so much more driven by the experience, by the connection that I have with all these other people, because, you know, to be able to be surrounded by like-minded people and people who are not like-minded just because they're driven, but because they have the similar interests that I have, right? Like they like doing dangerous things. You know, arm wrestling is dangerous, and if you like doing dangerous things, then it might be the sport for you. Strongman is dangerous. You like dangerous things, it might be the sport for you. But I also did BMX freestyle, where I'm like, you know, flying up in the air, like super high in the air, and skateboarding, where you're like, you know, coming down a hill, you know, fast enough to, you know, if you fall, you're gonna, you know, you might break something. You know, these are sports that I did because they were dangerous and because they were exciting and they were fun, but largely because there was community involved in it. You know, when I skateboarded, when I did BMX freestyle, I had friends that liked to do the same thing, and we had connections. It's the same thing in the sport of powerlifting, and in the sport of strongman, and the sport of arm wrestling. Arm wrestling has an enormously intrinsic like connection that you develop, because you know you're intimate. You're holding hands for crying out loud. You're holding hands with people aggressively, but you're holding hands, and there's bonds that are being made in those experiences. And the thing that I didn't like about bodybuilding was that the only real connections that you really had in bodybuilding were the connections in your gym, the people that you were training with. You know, so great back in the day. I don't even see enough of this these days. We try to do it here in our gym, but I tried to group people together as much as possible. You know, if they're on similar programs, or if they're not on a program, try to get them on a program. But it's like, hey, you have this objective and you have this objective, and you guys train, you know, around the same time. Could you match up your times on these days, and could you follow this program, and could you work out together? You know, because there's something really cool about building, you know, building that together and building that culture. And that's what I loved about bodybuilding, as it was for me for the longest part, a very individual thing. No one else was wanting to do that and train at such a young age. But when I started to get to the gym, be around these older men that had that same interest and would, you know, get in my ear and tell me things and educate me about what I was doing wrong, and I felt connected, right? And they pushed me to go do the sport. But when I went to the sport, and I went backstage and I was pumping up and I was, you know, doing this thing, it's like I didn't feel that connection. I didn't feel the support really the way that I felt when I went to my first powerlifting meet, my second powerlifting meet. Years later, when I got into the sport of arm wrestling, there's so much support. Like how many, you arm wrestle. I mean, you might be able to walk off the stage and go off to the side, and maybe take your hits really quick, and maybe if no one knows you, you can hide away and maybe not have the same experience. But if you continue to come back and people get to recognize you and know you, and you make it a point to engage with other people, and especially if you're part of a team that goes there together, you're going to get so much advice. You're going to get more advice than you can even process. You can even handle. You're like, oh, I know what you did wrong, and I do this myself. I'm like, hey, I think you probably should have done this, done that. I could be wrong, but I think for the most part, I'm trying to be useful. I'm trying to be helpful, and that's all anybody else is really doing either. But that's one of the things that makes it really, really great about our sport and about strength sports in general.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, the community is amazing in this sport. It really is special. Paul Stevens says, I identify as a 145 pounder, so now I can pull all the classes.
Yeah.
And
Okay,
Jason,
Paul.
Jason Eddy says, I hurt my shoulders throwing a frisbee. Be careful disc golfing. Come join our sport. We'll give you some elbow pain. You got to respect an elder's advice. 100%, 100%.
What was that?
He said you gotta respect an elder's advice. He's
An
calling.
elder's advice. Yeah, I'm definitely.
Is he calling you an elder?
Yeah, I think he is.
I think he did. Do you know Jason Eddy?
No, I mean, the name sounds familiar.
Yeah. So we had talked recently about the desire to collaborate with some other strength sport events or something, or like combat specifically. And sure enough, a buddy of mine that's up here on the mountain, he's really into wrestling. I guess more of like, what do they called it, like entertainment wrestling? So maybe like WWE, I don't know. But he showed up at our practice last night, and he set up an immediate meeting for us. We all kind of like packed up a little bit early and went to go meet this guy who throws those events up here on the mountain. And he literally gets, I guess, like 150 to 200 locals at his wrestling event. They have their own like ring that they set up anywhere. And he wants to do this. He wants to join forces.
I think it's a great idea. I think particularly, arm wrestlers that have a bit of that showman in them would be the ones that you want to sort of position and showcase in that. And I know right off the bat who I'm thinking of, right? Mm-hmm. Like this guy who's got these shades,
Mm-hmm.
And
he was exactly who I see. We've got a few, but Dave, yeah, that was the one person I thought of. Yeah, but I'm just gonna say it. Pretty Ricky, you're gonna go do this.
It takes personalities. It takes personalities. It takes to captivate and draw attention. And we go back and we look at Bob, from back in the day, the drinking the oil and chewing up light bulbs and stuff like that, and let the story where he was like, pulling Big Cleve Dean and like opens his mouth and a bird comes flying out of his mouth and stuff. These are the things that really threw the crowd in. And I we were talking about this the other day, how I feel like, if we can't get the athletes and we can't get the spectators, because we need the spectators. We can't get the spectators to come to us. We need to come to the spectators. We need to bring the events to places where it can at least generate more of that interest and people wanting to watch the sport, and also to feel like, hey, it's safe to watch the sport. Like I'm not as likely to see somebody break their arm or whatever.
And that's the part that was fascinating for me, is he's like, it's not 150 or 200 competitors that are coming to this. They're true spectators coming to just
Yeah, they're spectators.
watch
So
this.
why not make arm wrestling more of a spectator sport? My focus in on the spectacle of it, as long as the entertainers are also well trained. Kyle and I were a part of an event a few years ago where these young ladies were not professional entertainers, but they were bartenders, and they wanted to get together and do an arm wrestling tournament amongst them, and they wanted it to be very entertaining, but they wanted serious arm wrestling, meaning they wanted to have real bouts. And we did it the first time, and I didn't agree to do it the second time only because they weren't coming out. This next group of girls was not coming out and getting trained. And I wasn't going to just come out and bring my table or put myself and Kyle in a position where someone could get hurt and there'd be video of somebody getting hurt and us being there, being involved in it. Now, part of that was like, well, I should maybe, you can go and you can help keep them safe and whatnot. But I just felt like if you can't take the time to at least come in and train and learn the basics of the sport, then you couldn't take the time on your end, then I'm not going to give you the time on my end, right? You got to do something. You got to meet me halfway. And
Right.
But the idea and the concept was good because they were bringing the sport where they had people that they knew and people that wanted to see them, and there was a lot of their family that was, in a very entertaining way and in a very entertaining and receptive place. A bar where you're drinking alcohol and doing things like that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it is, we know about bar arm wrestling. It's not a new thing. And we've seen how well the sport can be, modified to television and can be more entertaining, but it could be even more of a spectacle. Could be done better to where you can draw even more attention. And I think that there are those people who have it within them to be even more entertaining and still be able to actually get into a real battle. And,
Right. Yeah.
If nothing else, I mean, from an entertainment standpoint, you could agree that maybe the first two, matches are scripted, and then they get into a real, actual, match, which is going to determine the outcome of the competition. Either way, it's going to be if it's done appropriately and it's done respectfully, in the sense where there's nothing that's going to discredit the sport and nothing that's going to go against the standards that we want to uphold for the sport, then it's a great idea. Great idea if it can get more eyes or more attention on the sport.
Well, yeah, there's names like right off the top of my head where like even if it wasn't scripted, it would be so entertaining. Like Michael Brown, like every match he's in is real, but it's hilarious. It's entertaining. He definitely brings a show when he goes to arm wrestle. Pretty Ricky is always interesting to watch. Robbie Noble, I'd love to see Robbie Noble in something like that. Yeah, one of my teammates that came with us is a newer guy, Ian Montagna. He's one of the 145 guys. As soon as we started talking about it with this guy, he's like, dude, I'm in. I'm gonna do the wrestling too. I'm gonna do the wrestling and I'm gonna do the arm wrestling.
I was thinking that.
All about it.
I was like, could I do the wrestling part of it? I mean,
yeah.
I would need to learn. I need to learn a lot.
I wouldn't know what to do, but I would do it. And a few people had some interesting ideas where, it kind of like so starts as arm wrestling, and the overall winners or something have to wrestle, like they have to like legit fight.
That would be fun. That would be fun.
Yeah, there's a lot of possibilities. Yeah,
let me get my singlet ready. Yeah, I got plenty. I got plenty of singlets.
Well, yeah. On that note, I think I'm going to call it a night. Dave, it's been such a pleasure chatting with you. And I look forward to doing this again. Thank you to everybody in the chat for participating. And yeah, man, I want to do this a lot more with you.
Yeah, absolutely. And look at those links there in the memos there. Be sure to follow me on social media, Dave DePew. You can get my YouTube channel, Dave DePew. I don't do enough on there. I want to do more, but please subscribe on there. Follow me on Instagram and message me. Let me know your questions, and I will create content or direct you to the content to help best answer your question. And we're working on training plans right now. We've got some basic stuff up there on the page already that you can follow. Some samples. We're working on some programs to help the beginners, the novice, and get them through all those pains that we talked about today, and get you to a tournament so you can watch it. The Fit Expo is a really great place to experience arm wrestling. I've had some people come out to that, over the years that really enjoyed it, really loved watching the excitement there, and then got connected with other clubs, whether it was an LA club or Riverside or way out far or whatnot. And so it's a great way to connect as well with some of these other clubs and stuff. So that'd be a great place to start. You support the expo, support arm wrestling there, and there's a lot of other fun things that you can see when you're out there too, besides the arm wrestling. And you get to, what sport do you actually get to walk up and talk to some of the best in the sport? Really, strength sports is the only thing where you really can experience that. You're not gonna get that in the NBA or in the NFL or Major League Baseball, maybe a little bit, but for the most part, like, arm wrestling is really one of the opportunities where you can follow somebody and track their success, and then you can actually meet them and engage with them and have your questions answered. And I'm inviting you to get your questions answered right here each time when I come back. Have some questions prepared that you want to ask in the chat, and also be able to send DM your questions to me too, and I can create some content created for you and answer those questions for you online.
Heck yeah, man. All right. Yeah, pleasure having you, Dave. I'll be reaching
Pleasure being
out.
on. Thank you so much for having me.
All right. Have a good night. We'll see you.